Chapter 7:15. The young girl's beautiful face, set off by the fresh flowers, was beautiful and charming. Su Mengue bent down and reached out to hold her hand, kissing the back of it like a gentleman. "Your Royal Highness, you are the only girl I've ever seen who is more beautiful than flowers." His slightly cool lips lightly touched the back of her fair and tender hand. There seemed to be a numbing electric current running through it. Wei Wei Bai quickly pulled back her hand, seemingly at a loss. She flew into a rage out of humiliation. "You don't play by my rules." Su Mengue was shouted at by her willfulness. His mature gentlemanly demeanor disappeared, replaced by a trace of youthful recklessness. He smiled bitterly. "Then I'll go down and pick up the crown." With that, he turned to jump into the swimming pool. Wei Wei Bai frowned and pursed her lips in dissatisfaction. Then she said, "Come back." "What are you going down for?" "You're like a wild dog trying to steal something I don't want." "So ugly." Su Mengue lowered his eyelashes, covering the darkness in his eyes. This was the little princess of the Bai family. She was so willful, it was annoying. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -30. Su Mengue hid his own darkness and immediately turned his head, staring at her blankly. Wei Wei Bai smiled sweetly, her eyes bright and clear, carrying a smug expression. "You, come here." Su Mengue hurried over but found that his footsteps were too hurried. He quickly adjusted his footsteps and took a deep breath, suppressing his nervous mood. When he arrived in front of Wei Wei Bai, he regained his elegant and gentle appearance. "What do you need me to do, Miss Bai?" Wei Wei Bai ordered, "Lower your head." Su Mengue looked at her awkwardly, but he still obeyed. He bent down and lowered his head. His beautiful eyes were deep and gentle. Her short black hair fell on her fair and full forehead. At this moment, he couldn't hide his fondness for her in his eyes. A trace of confusion flashed through Wei Wei Bai's eyes, and then she understood. She seemed a little nervous, but more than that, she was proud. This man was captivated by her. She was as arrogant as a real princess. "Kiss me." Su Mengue's eyes widened in shock. Wei Wei Bai moved closer to him. Her breath brushed against his cheek, fresh and sweet. Su Mengue staggered back 2 steps, as though he was really afraid of offending her. Bai Weiwei's delicate eyebrows furrowed. She muttered in dissatisfaction, "You're really boring, aw." Then, he turned around, took off the garland on his head, and threw it behind him. Su Mengue immediately caught it. His eyes dimmed, and a sorrowful expression appeared on his face. Did he not have a chance? Wei Wei Bai kicked away her high heels. "Dad, I'm tired." Bai Qingshui nodded. "Then go back and rest." Wei Wei Bai was barefooted. She threw away the jewelry on her body and stretched out her snow-white hand. She said to Su Mengue, "Hey, boyfriend, hurry up and carry me." Su Mengue looked up in shock. Wei Wei Bai gave him a sly smile. "Hurry up, I'm tired." Su Mengue hurried over, his breathing disorderly. Wei Wei Bai had him bend over and climbed onto his back. Su Mengue immediately reached out and carried her, his body terrifyingly stiff. She gently and seductively breathed in his ear. "From today onwards, you are the boyfriend I chose." Su Mengue's ears turned red. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have seen something amusing and laughed. In a blind spot, Su Mengue revealed an icy smile. Wei Wei Bai laughed while complaining to the system, "This is a ruthless character, a dead pervert with a fake smile." The system calmly encouraged, "My condolences." Bai Wei Wei. At the slash to read at https://www.sashu Comat https://www.sashu. Com at https://sashu. Com. Chapter 7:16. The banquet was held in Weiwei Bai's home. So Su Mengue carried Weiwei Bai to the second floor. She was very well behaved, lying down and not speaking again. Su Mengue sensed something was wrong and couldn't help but look back. He found that she was already asleep. Her face with baby fat was full of collagen, and her lips were as red as cherries. Because she was asleep, they were gently pouting. She looked like a naive little girl. She seemed to be 18 years old. Su Mengue recalled that when he was 18 years old, he had already begun to retaliate against the Su family. At that time, he was like a devil, hiding in the darkness, his heart full of frightening tricks. Su Mengue coldly looked ahead. The Bai family's house, because the decorations were what Weiwei Bai liked. Everywhere was extravagant and dreamy. Just like a princess's castle. If the Bai family collapsed one day, this little princess wouldn't live better than he did in his childhood. At that time, whenever he thought of her, his clear eyes were filled with pain and twisted hatred. Su Mengue felt the restlessness in his heart being appeased. Su Mengue saw the housekeeper arrive and immediately revealed a gentle smile. The housekeeper let him take Weiwei Bai to her room. The room was also filled with a maiden's heart, warm and comfortable. Su Mengue put Weiwei Bai on the bed. Weiwei Bai was unguarded. She reached out and automatically hugged the quilt to continue sleeping. Su Mengue coldly looked at her, truly unguarded. He expressionlessly took out a pen from his pocket and drew out a sticky note. He wrote a few words of a relatively unpopular love letter. He stuck it to the roses on the side. Then he sat on the side for a while, calculating the time. After all, he was playing the role of a clumsy and honest young man secretly in love with a little princess. After bringing her back to the room, he would nervously sit for a while, looking at her a few times to satisfy his desire before leaving. This was reasonable. Su Mengue calmly calculated the time, not too much, not too little. Then he stood up and walked out. As soon as he walked out, he saw the housekeeper waiting for him. He followed the housekeeper to a small living room. Bai Qingshui sized him up, his eyes cold and hard. A member of the Su family. The Su family was about to fall apart. Bai Qingshui also knew this. Su Mengue was well behaved in front of Bai Qingshui. There was no flattery or fear. Yes, Mr. Bai. Bai Qingshui, do you know why you're here today? Su Mengue paused before saying, I know. Bai Qingshui asked, are you planning to marry into the Bai family? A trace of bitterness flashed through Su Mengue's eyes, and a trace of struggle appeared on his face. But he still said, yes, if I have the honor. Bai Qingshui sneered, I just want to know your true purpose. Su Mengue's expression was calm. After my father left, the Su family is now in a great crisis. If I marry into the family, I can at least let the old and young of the Su family live on. After all, they are my family. Bai Qingshui said indifferently, that's it. Su Mengue hesitated for a moment before awkwardly saying, actually, I like it very much. He bit his tongue and didn't continue. However, Bai Qingshui knew that he was saying that he liked his daughter. Bai Qingshui smiled. He suddenly took out a gun and pointed it at his head. Han Ling's son. At that time, your mother almost killed our family. Su Mengue's pupils shrank, and his muscles tightened. A painful struggle flashed through his eyes. I know. This is also something that I feel very guilty and painful about. I was still young and didn't know about this matter. I didn't know until I grew up. Fast fast // fast. Chapter 7:17. Su Mengue smiled bitterly. This is my mother's fault, but as her son, I can't say anything. But we owe you. If you want my life to pay it back, then kill me. He spoke with sincerity. Bai Qingshui looked at him coldly, as if wanting to see his true emotions. But he only saw the tears of guilt in Su Mengue's eyes and the unwavering determination. Bai Qingshui finally revealed a smile. I didn't expect Han Ling to have such a good son. After he finished speaking, he smiled and fired the gun. Su Mengue didn't escape. He was just a little surprised, but there was no resentment. The gun had no bullets. It was a false alarm. Su Mengue was a little puzzled. Bai Qingshui said, Okay, you can go back. Remember to pick up Weiwei for a date tomorrow. Su Mengue didn't react in time. He was sluggish for a moment before saying, Okay, Mr. Bai, I will protect her. After he finished speaking, he realized he had said the wrong thing. It was too early to say he would protect her. He blushed and immediately said, Then I'll go first. You rest. With that, he immediately walked out. Bai Qingshui put the gun back and breathed a sigh of relief. Why did you pick the Su family's boy? Although his conduct is good, his family is really rotten. There was nothing to be done. Who told his daughter to like him? Su Mengue drove away from the Bai family. That dreamlike house, larger than a castle, was still brightly lit. Su Mengue suddenly revealed a silent smile. Slowly, his laughter grew louder. He said mockingly, It's all my mother's fault. Of course that bitch is wrong, but not only is she wrong, but the Su family, the Bai family, all of them are wrong. I want you all to feel the pain I felt back then. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to -35. Weiwei Bai heard the sound of the favorability dropping and yawned in confusion. Su Mengue is sick. How can favorability drop so casually? With that, she turned over and continued to sleep. After all, starting tomorrow, she might be exhausted from running for her life. If she could rest, she should rest. Weiwei Bai woke up and saw a note on the vase next to her. There were 2 lines of words of love written on it. There was also his phone number and name. Meeting you has cost me all the luck of my life. May I be able to say good morning, good afternoon, and good night to you every day. Weiwei Bai was expressionless. Then, she took a wooden box and threw it in. She picked up her phone and called Su Mengue. Su Mengue seemed to have been waiting and immediately picked up the phone. He said, Weiwei. Weiwei Bai didn't show any emotion on her face, but her voice was proud with a hint of happiness that couldn't be hidden. Hey, say it again. Su Mengue asked doubtfully and nervously, Say what? Weiwei Bai smiled and said, What are you talking about? Su Mengue fell silent. Then, as if he suddenly thought of something, he stammered, I am Su Mengue. This is my phone number, just as he was about to read out the phone number. Weiwei Bai interrupted him. Who's listening to this? Su Mengue seemed to be in a difficult position. In the end, he said in a low and hoarse voice, Meeting you took all my luck. May I be able to say good morning, good afternoon, and good night to you every day. His voice was magnetic and elegant. It could make the ears pregnant. Weiwei Bai seemed to be addicted to it. She repeated, Good morning, good afternoon. Halfway through, she bit her lip in annoyance and said, Who cares about your uneasiness? I won't talk to you anymore. With that, she hung up the phone. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record your reading record. Chapter 7:18. Wei Wei Bai hung up the phone and put on a fake smile. Believe it or not, Su Mengue must be on the other end of the phone, laughing at me for being an idiot. The system opened its heavenly eye. Seeing that the male lead, who had been so affectionate just a moment ago, had a cold expression, he whispered, "What an idiotic little girl." The host was really scary. She could even guess this. Wei Wei Bai said, "Where's my side mission reward?" The system was silent for a moment and then immediately ran to the trash can. There was no reward. Damn, the trash can really became a trash can. There were only a few boxes of instant noodles. The system was so desperate that it almost wanted to kill itself in the warehouse. It finally dug it out. It immediately pretended to be calm. The side mission reward is a body of ice and jade. I guarantee that your skin is beautiful without any blind spots. You don't need sunscreen under the sun, and you don't need waterproof makeup in the wind and rain because your skin is more beautiful than any makeup effect. This was a reward that was even cheaper and more trashy than the beauty award. It was afraid that Wei Wei Bai would see that something was wrong. Because the reward was simply not equal to the side mission. As a result, when Wei Wei Bai heard the reward, she nodded with satisfaction. Finally, something useful is rewarded. Perfect skin, very good. System, what was good? In the end, what was good? It was just a body of skin. Wei Wei Bai glanced at the mirror and found that she was indeed glowing. Her skin was bright and translucent, with a natural pink color. She couldn't hold herself back looking at it. She touched her face. Men need a strategy. In the early stages, appearance is a stepping stone, so beauty is sometimes very useful. If she was ugly, it wasn't that she couldn't be captured. It was just a little more difficult. With that, she immediately got up. Time to work. She called the housekeeper and the maids and arranged them into a long line. She had them start looking for clothes for her. She found everything that looked good and tried one after another. She made a big show out of it. When Su Mengue drove over, no one stopped him from entering the house. She heard the maid say, "What's wrong with Miss? She's making a fuss about choosing clothes so early in the morning." Another said, "I don't know. It looks like he's going on a date. He's probably going with the person he likes. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like this." Su Mengue's footsteps halted. He was just about to go up. Wei Wei Bai had already come downstairs. Her curly black hair draped over her back, and she wore a small diamond hair clip on her head. A pretty little skirt and exquisite sandals. Under the morning light, her skin was sparkling like snow. It seemed to be even more beautiful and clean than last night. Su Mengue's eyes deepened, and his jaw tightened. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have just noticed him. A trace of shyness flashed through her beautiful eyes, and then she walked down the stairs. Just as Su Mengue was about to approach, Wei Wei Bai sprained her ankle as she approached the ground because she was running too fast. He was shocked and immediately rushed over. He pulled her into his arms. It was very soft, very fresh, and did not have any excessive fragrance. It was an unexpectedly good feeling. Wei Wei Bai immediately pushed him away, her face flushed. "It's all your fault." Su Mengue was a little dazed, but he quickly apologized. "I'm sorry." Wei Wei Bai immediately stomped her feet and looked at him coquettishly. "Why are you so easy to bully? I said you were wrong and you really admitted it." After saying this, Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but laugh. Her smile was very cute. Then, she was as happy as a little butterfly as she quickly ran out of the room. For a moment, Su Mengue couldn't keep up with her pace. If other people were so temperamental and willful, they would be very annoying. But Su Mengue felt that if the reason for his dislike of the Bai family was removed, She wasn't annoying at all. / Read the full text. // Read on. Calm. Chapter 719. She was like a real princess, making people willingly pamper her no matter what she did. Wei Wei Bai had already run outside. She stood by the fountain, smiling like a flower. "I say, idiot, why aren't you following me?" The fountain and sunlight became her background. Her slender and elegant appearance was exceptionally pleasing to the eye. Su Mengue couldn't help but reveal a smile. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -30. He quickly sensed the softness of his attitude. Su Mengue frowned but soon relaxed. His smile deepened as he walked up. Because Bai Qingshu allowed it, he tacitly agreed that Su Mengue was a married husband. So when they went out, it went very smoothly. Su Mengue's car was well behaved, a black, low-key sedan. Wei Wei Bai gave him a disdainful look. "Can't you change to a better car? I'll have someone bring you a better car tonight." A trace of darkness flashed through Su Mengue's eyes. He smiled and said, "Do you want to provide for me, Miss Bai?" Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips, her eyes naturally giving him a sidelong glance. "Provide for you? You're old and barely a little handsome. What a loss to provide for you. Even if I have money, I want to provide for a young and strong one." Su Mengue's expression darkened. He forced a smile. "I also want to be born a few years later. Unfortunately, age can't be changed." Wei Wei Bai seemed to be unable to bear seeing his old-fashioned appearance. She reached out, pinched his cheeks, and pulled them to the sides. "How are you old in appearance? You're old-fashioned, okay. You're also very handsome when you smile." Su Mengue froze. His face reddened, and he forced a smile. But the smile in her fingers was a bit strange. Wei Wei Bai released his face and couldn't help but laugh happily. "You're really funny." Su Mengue helplessly rubbed his face. "Miss Bai." Wei Wei Bai stretched out her index finger and gently tapped his forehead. "Don't call me Mississippi. What era is this? Call me Your Majesty Queen." Su Mengue was frightened. Why Queen? Queen?" Wei Wei Bai covered her mouth and stared at him with wide eyes, as if she was looking at an alien monster. "God, how did you grow up? I feel like you're my grandfather's generation. You actually took my joke seriously." Su Mengue knew that he was being teased again and could only helplessly and dotingly look at her. He wasn't angry at all. Wei Wei Bai stopped teasing him. "You can call me Wei Wei." Su Mengue said gently, "Wei Wei." Wei Wei Bai also said, "Xiao Meng." Su Mengue, a corner of his perfect mask crumbled. What the hell was Xiao Meng? Wei Wei Bai didn't care about his expression and suddenly said, "Quick, step on the gas." Su Mengue was puzzled. Wei Wei Bai said excitedly, "It's not easy to come out and play, so of course I have to get rid of those guys behind me. If they follow me all day, I can't play anymore." The guy behind him was the bodyguard. Their car was followed by 2 bodyguard cars. They were all protecting Wei Wei Bai. Su Mengue revealed a cold smile, but his tone was very worried. "But they're also protecting you." Wei Wei Bai's voice was like jade beads falling on a plate, crisp and trusting. "It's fine as long as you're here." This sentence was said too lightly, without a trace of vigilance. Su Mengue tightened his grip on the steering wheel and said gently, "Then sit tight." With that, the car accelerated and sped off at the limit. Wei Wei Bai almost thought she was in an open plane. The speed was terrifyingly high. Wei Wei Bai's bodyguard was left behind who knew where. Su Mengue saw Wei Wei Bai's pale face and sneered without batting an eyelid. Then he deliberately drove a few more laps. Wei Wei Bai's face turned even paler. This bastard. Chapter 720. After tormenting her, Su Qing stopped. Su Mengue stopped the car and said with a worried expression, "Are you okay?" Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai's face was pale, but her eyes were filled with excitement as she looked at Su Mengue. "You're amazing. You can drive so fast." A trace of surprise flashed through Su Mengue's eyes. He thought this young miss would be so scared that she would cry and shout to go home. Wei Wei Bai's expression suddenly became melancholy. "Little Meng, will you take me somewhere?" "Su Mengue, don't call me Little Meng." Of course, he wouldn't protest. He could only endure and comply. "I'll take you wherever you want to go." Wei Wei Bai smiled happily. "Although you're a bit old-fashioned and honest, you're really likable." Saying this, she didn't care about Su Mengue's expression and opened the door to get out of the car. She entered a flower shop on the side of the street. The flower shop had glass windows. He saw Wei Wei Bai lowering her head to pick flowers. It was rare for the willful and insensible young miss to have such a gentle expression. Through the glass, the person was more beautiful than the flowers. Su Mengue's eyes deepened. He took out a cigarette but didn't smoke it. He just played with it between his fingers. Suddenly, his cell phone rang. He picked it up and heard the person on the other side say that they were ready. He smiled coldly. "Very good. Just wait for my instructions." Saying this, he hung up the phone. Wei Wei Bai walked over with a bouquet of lilies. She got in the car and said, "Let's go." Su Mengue asked, "Where to?" Wei Wei Bai said softly, "Greenfield Cemetery." This cemetery was the best in the city. Su Mengue didn't expect to go to this place. He thought Wei Wei Bai wanted to go to a bar or something like that, a place she normally couldn't enter. The two arrived at the cemetery. Wei Wei Bai walked to her mother's tombstone and placed the flowers on it. "My mother left me a long time ago, but I still remember that she was very gentle and beautiful." Wei Wei Bai squatted in front of the tombstone and said with a sad smile, "Although my father loves me, he always has to work and can't accompany me. I've always been living alone." As she spoke, tears appeared in her eyes. She hurriedly wiped them away, and her voice became hoarse. "Even when I wanted to visit Mommy, Daddy didn't agree. He was afraid that I would be kidnapped." Su Mengue's mood became somewhat complicated. To say it was pitiful wasn't right. It didn't seem like hatred either. Perhaps it was because seeing Wei Wei Bai in such a fragile state reminded him of his childhood. He was also abandoned and left with nothing. Of course, this emotion was only fleeting and did not affect his rational judgment. Wei Wei Bai wiped her eyes and returned to her usual self. "Hold my hand." Su Mengue didn't resist. He took her hand and was pulled down to squat down with her. Wei Wei Bai revealed a bright, happy smile. "Mommy, this is Little Meng. He's the husband I chose. I brought him to see you." Su Mengue was caught off guard and was hit in the heart by these words. His mind even went blank for a few seconds. Because he didn't expect that she would come to the cemetery just to introduce him to her mother. Her hand tightly held his fingers. She looked at him sideways, her eyes full of smiles. "Little Meng, I scared you by introducing you to my mother. But I chose you, so you can't run away." She spoke in a domineering and willful manner, but also so cute that one couldn't hate her. Su Mengue didn't know why, but his gaze evaded her. Then he used his powerful reason to suppress his emotional loss and revealed a fake affectionate smile. Then he said insincerely, I'm really, really happy that you chose me. Although it was a lie, he found that Wei Wei Bai wasn't that disgusting. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to -20. / quick. Chapter 721. On the way back, the car ran out of gas. Su Mengue looked guilty. I remember there's a gas station not far away. I'll go take a look. Wei Wei Bai nodded absent-mindedly. Then hurry up. As if ordering a servant. A trace of gloom flashed across Su Mengue's face. When he turned around, he smiled, unspeakably sinister. When he couldn't see the car, he used his phone to call the person he arranged. Move. With that, he hung up the phone. Then he took out a cigarette. Under the streetlight, he looked gloomily in the direction of the car. Like a wild wolf hunting in the night, indifferent and determined to win. As soon as Su Mengue left, Wei Wei Bai said to the system, the next plot is probably a hero saving the beauty. System, saving what beauty? Where is the beauty? Wei Wei Bai, the system reacted. Saving you. Oh. Wei Wei Bai. These are all leftover tricks I played. It's not new at all. I reckon a few criminals will appear later and rob me of my money and body. Then Su Mengue will appear and beat them away. In the end, he'll get hurt, and then I'll completely fall in love with him. The system looked outside. Shit, there really were a few hooligan-like criminals rushing over. And they looked like professional experts at first glance. Wei Wei Bai rubbed his face. I have to cooperate. Otherwise, how can the favorability increase? System, this can increase favorability. This favorability was only -20. Wei Wei Bai had an experienced expression. Hee hee. System, the host's smile is so scary. Wei Wei Bai had just finished chuckling when the car door was pulled open. A few hooligans revealed lewd smiles. Yo, look what we found. Wei Wei Bai's face paled. What are you doing? The hooligans didn't waste time with her. They reached out and dragged her out of the car, carrying her as they left. On the way, they deliberately said something. There's going to be fun tonight. I haven't seen such a beautiful woman in a long time. Hee hee hee. As Wei Wei Bai listened, her face turned paler and paler. She struggled desperately. Let me go, I will give you a lot of money. My father is very rich. The hooligan sneered, it's better to be rich. When I'm tired of you, I can still extort some money from your family. Wei Wei Bai was so scared that tears came out of her eyes. She suddenly shouted, Su Mengue, Su Mengue, but in addition to the cold wind, there was also the dark night. Where was Su Mengue's shadow? Wei Wei Bai didn't care and desperately called out Su Mengue's name. Su Mengue held the phone, which was connected to the communication devices on the hooligans. Wei Wei Bai's shrill cries came from his hand. Su Mengue was indifferent, coldly watching from the sidelines. Her voice gradually weakened. It was hoarse and powerless, as if she was in despair, and there were even traces of sobbing mixed in. The little princess left the castle and was taken away by bad people. He must be terrified. Su Mengue estimated that when the gangsters were scared out of their wits, he would appear again. When the time came, he would be her hero. This kind of little girl's love. He would easily get his hands on her. Wei Wei Bai screamed until the end, but no one came to save her. Instead, the system covered its ears. I'm going deaf. The male lead isn't here, so there's no need to put so much effort into acting. Wei Wei Bai sneered. If it were me, of course I would control the whole process. So these criminals must have something like a communication device on them, so they can hear the sounds here. / Fast. Chapter 722. The system opened its heavenly eye. Wei Wei Bai continued, and the enemy's desolate cries sound so good. It's a pity not to listen. The system glanced at Su Mengue, who was currently sneering sinisterly. It was silent, feeling that the host's brain circuit was infinitely close to that of a pervert. What was going on? Wei Wei Bai was forcefully dragged to an abandoned factory. In the dark place, only the shabby street lamps shone in some light. To show how good they were at being cannon fodder, the hooligans reached out and pushed her to the ground. Wei Wei Bai looked at them in horror. My dad is very powerful. He won't let you go. The hooligan sneered. We'll rape you first and then kill you. Once we throw your corpse in the sea, who'll know we did it? Wei Wei Bai's body trembled. It looked like she was scared out of her wits. The hooligan knew that he needed to teach Wei Wei Bai a lesson and let her know the pain. Only then would she thank the person who came to save the beauty. So he reached out to slap Wei Wei Bai. In the end, the slap missed. He saw Wei Wei Bai nimbly shrink into a corner. Don't come over. My husband is coming. He's very powerful. She was extremely scared. Her body trembled incessantly, and tears streamed down her face. The hooligan's doubts dissipated. This kind of young miss, he could pinch her however he wanted. The hooligan walked over and reached out to slap her again. Shut up, slut. Wei Wei Bai's body shrank back, just barely dodging his slap. The hooligan was also annoyed. He pounced over like a tiger, about to tear open her skirt. Wei Wei Bai screamed, Don't come over. Help. The iron rod in her hand smashed into the center of the hooligan's forehead. The hooligan only felt his whole body buzz. Then he directly fainted. Wei Wei Bai didn't seem to notice. She held an abandoned iron pipe from the factory in her hand and kept smashing it at the hooligan. Even his bones were cracking. While smashing Wei Wei Bai, she said in fear, Don't come over, don't come over. She was so fragile and pitiful that it made one's heart ache. The remaining two were shocked and immediately ran over to grab her. However, for some reason, the iron pipe in Wei Wei Bai's hand suddenly changed direction. A hooligan who had just reached her side was hit in the temple by the iron pipe. Was this really not intentional? The hooligan fell to the ground, his vision turning dark. Then, for some unknown reason, the iron pipe suddenly smashed between his legs. He felt that not only was the sky dark, but his future was dark as well. The last hooligan was lucky enough to grab Wei Wei Bai's iron pipe. Then, he pushed Wei Wei Bai to the ground. Seeing his brother in such a pitiful state, he did not even think before smashing the iron pipe in his hand. Bitch, I'll kill you. Wei Wei Bai immediately closed her eyes in despair. The name she shouted in the last second was, Su Mengue, why aren't you coming to save me? The sound of the iron pipe hitting against the ground was particularly clear in the darkness. Wei Wei Bai thought she was dead for sure, but after waiting for a while, she was met with a warm touch. A dry and warm hand gently stroked her face. Then a gentle angelic voice sounded. Wei Wei, I've come to save you. Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes and found that the iron pipe had smashed into Su Mengue's body. Su Mengue endured the pain. His expression trembled, but he still smiled gently at her. It's okay, I'm here. / Chapter 723. This sentence was so reassuring that Wei Wei Bai's nose turned sour. She said aggrievedly, They bullied me. A trace of heartache flashed through Su Mengue's eyes. But his fingers signaled for the hooligan to continue. The hooligan received the order and immediately smashed the iron pipe down again. Su Mengue immediately jumped up, enduring the pain as he shielded her. Then he kicked the hooligan away. This smooth movement was calculated from an angle. He looked particularly handsome. The hooligan screamed and rolled on the ground a few times before fainting. A fierce anger appeared on Su Mengue's gentle face. "You dare to hurt the person I like." After he said this, he was startled. He seemed to realize that he had blurted out his innermost thoughts. He immediately turned his head to look at Wei Wei Bai. He found that she was also staring at him blankly. There were tears in her big, beautiful eyes, very bright. Su Mengue immediately lowered his head in embarrassment and bent down to pick her up. "Let's go quickly. I just called the police." Wei Wei Bai was held in his arms. She looked at him with a complicated expression. There was the fear of surviving a disaster, but more than that, there was throbbing emotion. Sometimes, it was easy to move a girl's heart. He just needed to let her know that he was her prince. And Su Mengue's heroic performance tonight was undoubtedly her best night, her best prince. Su Mengue found the car just now and put her in it. Then he also got in. His brows were still furrowed in anger, and his usual good-natured smile was gone. He suddenly slammed his hand on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have left you." After he finished speaking, he continued to smash the steering wheel, as if to punish himself. Wei Wei Bai reached out and gently grasped his fist. "Little Mang." Su Mengue trembled. It was the godlike little Mang again. But when he turned to look at her, he saw that her willful and delicate appearance was gone, leaving only gentleness. A grateful and sincere smile appeared on her fragile and beautiful face. "Thank you." Su Mengue said with annoyance, "Don't thank me for saving you. You should hate me. My departure hurt you." Wei Wei Bai gently shook her head and said in a soft voice, "I thank you for liking me." Su Mengue was stunned. Wei Wei Bai cupped her face and looked at him with a look of appreciation, as if she was looking at a rare treasure. "I never thought that there would really be someone who likes me and is willing to protect me despite the danger." Su Mengue paled and his face turned red. Like. Not many people like you. You are so beautiful." Bai Wei Wei tiredly shook her head. "They all like my father's money, that's all. Everyone who comes to marry into the family is eyeing the inheritance of the Bai family's company, but no one has ever really liked me." Su Mengue angrily blurted out, "How could that be? You're so cute, so beautiful. Anyone who sees you will like you." After saying this, Su Mengue blushed again. "No, I mean, you're so good." The more he explained, the more he exposed his true intentions. Su Mengue finally realized how stupid he was and quickly shut his mouth. Wei Wei Bai looked at him with understanding. Her eyes grew softer and softer, happier and happier. She suddenly turned sideways, raised her head, and gently kissed him on the cheek. A light kiss, unbelievably pure. Su Mengue was stunned for a moment. The soft touch of the girl's lips remained on his cheek, and his nose was filled with her fresh fragrance. // To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 724. Wei Wei Bai smiled. His bashful appearance made her happy. "Is this the first time you like someone?" Su Mengue lowered his head, his face red and neck thick. It was as though Wei Wei Bai was a scourge and he couldn't wait to run away. Wei Wei Bai's temper flared up again. She tugged at his arm and shook it coquettishly. "Isn't it? Tell me, isn't it?" Her voice was sweet and greasy, but surprisingly, it wasn't annoying. On the contrary, it was very pleasant to hear. Su Mengue couldn't help but whisper, and Wei Wei Bai didn't let him go. She gently breathed in his ear, full of temptation. Then who is it? Su Mengue's neck shrunk. He seemed very sensitive, but he didn't dare to speak. Wei Wei Bai slowly approached him. Su Mengue shrank to the side in panic. Was it me? She asked boldly, blinking her eyes. Su Mengue didn't expect her to be so direct. His breathing was disordered. His lips trembled, but he refused to speak. Wei Wei Bai's voice became sad. I told you, no one will like me. Su Mengue immediately became anxious. No, I like you very much. You are the first girl I like. After saying this, he realized that he had been tricked. Sure enough, Wei Wei Bai laughed. Her laughter was crisp and lovely. Su Mengue looked at her helplessly. Because of her smile, his cold expression also loosened. Wei Wei Bai suddenly stole a glance at him, like a sly little fox. Me too. Su Mengue was stunned. What is it? Wei Wei Bai, growing up, this is the first time I like a man. Su Mengue reacted. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Wei Wei Bai said, I like you, little Mang. She confessed, but she was generous and natural, without the slightest shyness. Her eyes were clear and thorough, without the slightest hint of joking. It was as though when she said like, she meant like for a lifetime. Only then did Su Mengue realize that his thoughts were in chaos. He immediately armed himself and displayed the reaction he should have. He reached out and hugged her, burying his face in her shoulder. His nose was filled with the girl's fragrance. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. The smell was clean and fragrant. Then, he retracted his wolf-like gaze and tried to make his voice sound excited. Wei Wei, I'm very happy. I'm really happy. Wei Wei Bai said softly, you're so silly. It was a light sentence, but it was sweet to the bone. Su Mengue didn't know why, but his heartbeat sped up. Although he quickly suppressed his true emotions, his eyes couldn't help but soften when he looked at Wei Wei Bai. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -15. When Su Mengue sent Wei Wei Bai back, the room was brightly lit. Bai Qingshui sat in the living room, indifferently looking at Su Mengue. Wei Wei Bai saw that the situation was not right and immediately ran to him happily. Daddy. Bai Qingshui snorted. So you still know to come back. Su Mengue stood obediently with his head lowered, looking as though he was waiting for punishment. Bai Qingshui had long known what had happened. Seeing his daughter's dirty clothes, he was furious. Su Mengue, are you looking for death? You took my daughter out and something like that happened. You still have the face to come back. Su Mengue frowned but didn't refute. It's all my fault. I didn't protect Wei Wei well. Bai Qingshui looked at him coldly. I'll break your legs and deprive you of the right to marry into the family. Scram. Download the https://www.sashu.com/ Download the full article, https://www.sashu.com// Download the full article, https://www.sashu.com. Download the full article, https://m.sashu.com. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 725. Su Mengue's face paled, and his eyes became somewhat sorrowful. Like a little cabbage being bullied, he glanced at Wei Wei Bai. He wasn't afraid, but he was very reluctant to part with her. Then he said, okay. Without the slightest rebuttal or begging for mercy, he accepted. Wei Wei Bai suddenly rushed to Su Minggui's side and reached out to grab his fingers. Their 10 fingers intertwined, tightly intertwining. Then she raised her chin. "Dad, you can't touch him." Bai Qingshui scolded, "Nonsense. The first time he took you out, he got rid of the bodyguards and caused you to have an accident. He must have ulterior motives." Wei Wei Bai smiled. Under the crystal lights, her smile was so beautiful that one couldn't take their eyes off her. "I believe him. He's the man I chose." These words were powerful and resonant, yet tender as water. Su Mengue blankly lowered his head and saw that Wei Wei Bai's eyes were full of bright lights, like stars. She found that he was looking at her and couldn't help turning her head and winking mischievously at him. Her eyes were lively, and her smile was brilliant. Su Mengue felt his chest being hit. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to -10. Bai Qingshui said angrily, "A grown girl can't be kept at home." "You like him?" Wei Wei Bai immediately said in dissatisfaction, "Dad, you don't care about me at all." Bai Qingshui angrily slapped the chair. "Which part of me doesn't care about you?" Wei Wei Bai stretched out her hand. "Look, it's all bruised. It hurts. You don't care where I'm hurt. As soon as you come, you want to kill me. You don't love me anymore." Bai Qingshui became nervous when he heard this. He quickly got up and held Wei Wei Bai's hand to examine it. He immediately ordered, "Where the hell did the doctor go? Come and take a look at Wei Wei." Although the information that had just been sent said that Wei Wei wasn't seriously injured. But the old father's love for his daughter was really too much. Wei Wei Bai smiled smugly. Su Mengue saw this scene and found it a little dazzling. His fingers couldn't help but clench. The doctor came. He was just about to show it to Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai suddenly grabbed Su Mengue's hand and pressed him onto the sofa. Su Mengue, who was still immersed in the scene of father-daughter love between Bai Qingshui and Wei Wei Bai, had a dark mood in his heart. When Wei Wei Bai pulled and held him down, he suddenly woke up. Without waiting for him to put on the fake mask, Wei Wei Bai had already reached out and ripped off his clothes. Su Mengue's body stiffened. So hungry. But in the next second, he realized that he was wrong. Wei Wei Bai's small hand gently stroked his back. As expected, it's a very serious injury. To win Wei Wei Bai's trust, Su Mengue had suffered a solid blow from the iron pipe. His back was already bruised and bleeding. It looked particularly scary. Wei Wei Bai immediately grabbed the doctor and said, "Quick, take a look at him. If you can't, you'll be buried with him." Such comical words in such an occasion. This made many people burst into laughter. Even Su Mengue couldn't help but laugh. Why would this kind of injury need to be buried with him? He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But this kind of concern was real. Su Mengue thought back to just now. She clearly didn't have any wounds, but she wanted to see a doctor. He thought that her princess syndrome was acting up again, but it turned out that she called for him. Su Mengue rarely received kindness, but the result was, the daughter of the enemy he schemed against made his mood better. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to -5. The doctor massaged him, applied ointment, and then tied a bandage. There's no injury to the bone. It's not a big problem. Don't come into contact with water for a few days. Wei Wei Bai nodded on the side, as though he was speaking to her. Su Mengue glanced at her with a complicated expression. Transmigration system, male god, come here. /transmigration system, male god, come here. Read the full text. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Read on. com// Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 726. After a period of turmoil and chaos, the Bai clan finally quieted down. Under Wei Wei Bai's strong request, Su Mengue stayed the night. Wei Wei Bai, sleep in my room. Su Mengue and Bai Qingshui looked at her in shock. Wei Wei Bai pointed at her father's nose. What if you drag him out and break his legs? Sleep in another room. What if your people drag him out and bury him alive while he's sleeping? Bai Qingshui's hair stood on end. You don't want a father when you want a man. You simply, after being angry for a long time, he couldn't bear to scold her and left bitterly. Su Mengue realized that this was what she meant by having him sleep in her room. Wei Wei Bai took his hand and went to her room. Then she went to take a bath. After the bath, the maid came. She hurriedly ran out with a towel around her, her slender and beautiful feet exposed. Sitting on the side, Su Mengue's eyes darkened. The maid took out a bag of condoms. Master said to protect yourself well. You can enjoy, but you can't casually get pregnant. Wei Wei Bai blankly took it, as if she hadn't reacted to what it was. When she came back to her senses, she saw Su Mengue's complicated expression. Her face turned red. She immediately hid the condom behind her back and said with a red face, I didn't mean that. Su Mengue suppressed a smile. If it were any other time, he would have laughed. But now he was playing the role of a gentle good guy. He immediately lowered his head and said somewhat shyly, I know, I didn't mean that. When Bai Wei Wei heard this, she became anxious. Are you a man? Aw. This isn't interesting. Su Mengue was dumbfounded. He stammered, then it's interesting. Wei Wei Bai was amused by him and didn't bully him anymore. She returned to the bathroom to change into pajamas. After changing, Su Mengue also went to take a bath. The bathroom was filled with girls' things, and the air was filled with the fragrance of bathing. Su Mengue didn't have a bashful appearance. Instead, he was expressionless for a while before coldly smiling. Then, he couldn't help but touch the bathtub. He immediately thought of her bare shoulders and ankles when she ran out just now. It was very slender and beautiful, like a cute little butterfly. It was so fragile that it would break with a pinch. For a moment, Su Mengue's eyes burned with a dark greed. Like a wolf, there was a hungry glint in his eyes. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 0. The system asked, bathing can increase affinity. Wei Wei Bai, maybe this pervert is fantasizing about something in the bathroom. If he's happy, his favorability will naturally increase. One look and you can tell that he was miserable when he was young and he grew up to take revenge on society. The more miserable others are, the happier he is. After getting along with Su Mengue, in addition to the system's data, Wei Wei Bai more or less guessed Su Mengue's abnormal personality. Su Mengue was a man with a twisted heart and childhood trauma. Therefore, after taking revenge on the Su family that had caused him so much pain, he realized that his heart was still in pain. He would take revenge on the unlucky Bai family as well. In any case, he had never thought that there was anything wrong with him. Only then would he feel that revenge could calm him down. Wei Wei Bai, so the strategy for this kind of person is to use my kind and beautiful heart to influence him, love him, and persevere in guarding him. Let him know that there is true love in the human world and true feelings in the world. Then his favorability will increase. The system was puzzled. Do you have a kind and beautiful heart? Wei Wei Bai. My heart should, probably, possibly. Then the system and the host stopped talking. Hee hee. Quick. Chapter 727. You can search Transmigration System, Prince Charming, come to search web, www.sashu.com, in Baidu to find the. Finally, he came to her fragrant, pink lips. His fingertips touched the moist warmth of her lips. His eyes deepened and brightened. What a child. She didn't know the cruelty of the adult world and didn't doubt his approach. Just like that, she liked him so easily. Su Mengue revealed a malicious smile. Sure enough, this world was too good to her. It really made people jealous. When he was abused like this, she was the little princess doted on by thousands. Everyone used the excuse of offending by Qing Shui to bully him and humiliate him. He lived in hell, having nightmares every day. And his little princess, from childhood to adulthood, lived carefree and never knew that there were bad people in this world. Su Mengue opened his mouth and said, "Do you know? When I see you, I feel disgusted." He had seen her once when he was a child. At that time, he was like a wild dog, injured and hiding by the garbage dump, afraid that he would be caught and beaten. He was terrified and resentful. A luxury car came from afar. Wei Wei Bai was wearing a clean and beautiful princess dress, holding a doll. She was like a person from another world, completely different from him. She seemed to notice him and gave him a faint glance. Like she was looking at a wild dog. Then she threw herself into Bai Qingshui's arms. "Dad, it's dirty here. Let's go." Bai Qingshui looked at her dotingly. "Okay, my little princess." Su Mengue thought of that scene. How many nights had he hated that he couldn't trample her into the mud? Why did she have to live happily, while he had to live in hell? Su Mengue reached out and pulled up the quilt for Wei Wei Bai, slowly covering her. His movements were slow and gentle. But his silent words made people shudder. "Sleep well. There's not much time for good dreams." Wei Wei Bai frowned. Seeming to sense the coldness, she suddenly reached out and grabbed his hand. Su Mengue, who was still silently sneering, stiffened and wanted to pull back. But she held on tightly. Then she put his hand under her face, pressing her soft face into his warm palm. Like a cute little animal, she rubbed against him and smiled contentedly. If he didn't know she was asleep, he would have thought she was pretending to be asleep. Su Mengue could have pulled back, but for some reason, he just sat there in a daze. Then he maintained his position, his hand under her face, and looked at her like this all night. Ding, the male leads favorability, 10. System, just a second ago, he was filled with killing intent, but in the next second, his favorability increased. This is a little confusing. After a night of sleeping together, Bai Weiwei clung to Su Mengue even more. Su Mengue was still honest and gentle. Wei Wei Bai was delicate, but she liked him. So the two people got along. Su Mengue knew that the time was right and began to plan his entry into the Bai family's company step by step. Su made Su Su. Su Mengue Bai. The days were hectic but fulfilling. Unknowingly, half a month had passed. The favorable impression points weren't too high, only 15. Wei Wei Bai wasn't in a hurry, but the system scratched its head. This favorability is too hard to increase. Wei Wei Bai, what favorability increase for no reason? If there's no life or death, heart-wrenching, and unreasonable tantrums, how can favorability increase? If favorability was too easy to increase, the side mission would be like hell mode. So when Wei Wei Bai saw that favorability wasn't easy to increase, she was relieved. Chapter 728. Su Mengue didn't have such a good attitude as Wei Wei Bai. All of his plans had been set in motion. Bai Qingshui was the first obstacle. He walked into the hotel with a natural attitude and went upstairs. He arrived at the room he had booked in advance. Then he swiped the card and opened the door. A sexy and beautiful woman saw him and immediately greeted him with surprise and enchantment. She said, "Mengue, I've done what you asked me to do." Su Mengue nodded indifferently. "You've already drugged him." The woman revealed a smug smile. "Bai Qingshui comes here once a month. The powder you gave me is colorless and tasteless. I rubbed it in a glass of red wine." No matter how vigilant he was, he drank it without thinking. This woman was Bai Qingshui's mistress. Bai Qingshui was afraid that marrying a stepmother would affect Wei Wei Bai's right to inheritance, so he didn't give any woman a chance to enter the Bai family. Not to mention having children with other women. But men had deep-rooted bad habits. So Bai Qingshui had several mistresses. This woman was one of them. Wei Wei Bai didn't know. Su Mengue gave the woman a card. "This money is enough for you to go overseas and live a life of luxury." The woman stretched out her red-nailed fingers and took the card, stroking his fingers in passing. She very suggestively leaned over. "Mengue, you said that if I succeeded, you would be with me." Although Su Mengue hated her before, at least he could deal with her with ease. But today, for some reason, he smelled the strong perfume on her body. He felt a little nauseous. Perhaps it was because he had been with Wei Wei Bai all this time, but she never used perfume on herself. There was only the scent of her body and the scent of the shower gel she used for bathing. It wasn't strong, but very refreshing. After smelling it for a long time, he got used to it. Su Mengue calmly took a step back. "It's best if we pretend we don't know each other. I'm leaving." He turned to leave. But the woman behind him threw herself at him. Su Mengue immediately dodged. The woman cried. "Mengue, you know I like you, so you risked your life to help you. I thought you at least had some feelings for me." Su Mengue glanced at her contemptuously. "Don't think too much." When he opened the door and was about to leave, he heard a voice coming from behind. The woman suddenly said, "Have you fallen for Wei Wei Bai?" Su Mengue immediately turned his head fiercely. "Don't talk nonsense." The woman sneered, "It's easy to see through a man's hypocrisy, but you can't hide your sincerity. Haven't you seen the way you look at Wei Wei Bai?" Su Mengue's eyes were cold and gloomy. He didn't speak. The woman rushed over without a care and fiercely hugged Su Mengue. She said with a bitter smile, "You don't hate her at all. You don't hate her at all." Su Mengue got goosebumps. His entire body was filled with this woman's fragrance, which disgusted him. He rudely pried her hand away and pushed her to the ground. His voice was filled with murderous intent as he said, "Know your place and take the money and scram. If I see you again, you know what will happen to you." He was truly enraged. Her scent was still on his clothes. He frowned uncomfortably and unceremoniously slammed the door shut. She was going to change her clothes and take a shower, but she glanced at the time. She realized that it was time for the appointment with Wei Wei Bai. He hurried to the hotel lobby and saw a figure running in through the door. It was Wei Wei Bai. She wore a beautiful light blue dress, and her hair was tied with a golden hairband. She laughed happily as she threw herself into his arms. "Mengue, let's go quickly. Dad is still waiting for us." Su Mengue corrected her many times for calling him Little Mang. She finally showed mercy and stopped calling him Little Mang. Su Mengue smoothly hugged her. The sticky fragrance from before disappeared in an instant. Smelling her fresh fragrance made him sigh in relief. Like an addict, he couldn't help holding her tighter. But then he suddenly thought of the woman's words. He didn't hate her. There was a decorative glass screen next to the hotel, transparent like a mirror. He looked over and saw his own gentle face. There was no sense of gloominess or coldness in his eyes. Instead, there was helplessness and joy as he happily looked at Wei Wei Bai. This wasn't an act. It was his true mood at the moment. Su Mingue's heart shook, and his expression turned ugly. He should be disgusted with her. Chapter 729. Today was Bai Qingshui's birthday. Bai Qingshui had specifically instructed that it wasn't to be a big affair. He had only booked a banquet at the Imperial Phoenix restaurant. At the banquet, all the company's elders and important figures were present. After they arrived, Bai Qingshui placed 2 ring boxes on the table. Before Wei Wei Bai took out the gift, she stared curiously at the ring box. "Dad, what is this?" Bai Qingshui said, "It's for you and Mengue." Saying this, he pushed the ring box in front of the two. "Mengue has been experimenting with me during this time. You really do like him, so I'll let you get engaged first." This was to directly acknowledge Su Mingue's status as a son-in-law at Bai Qingshui's banquet. Innocent joy flashed across Wei Wei Bai's face. "Thank you, Dad." Saying this, she picked up the ring and said to Su Mingue with a sweet smile, "Mingue, hold out your hand." Su Mingue saw that her eyes were filled with his shadow, without a trace of haze. It was as if he was her sunshine. For the first time, he faced her feelings head-on. She really did like people like him. This kind of fake persona that he had carefully designed, clean, honest, and could accompany her. Su Mingue showed a hypocritical smile and held out his hand. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed, becoming solemn and solemn. She slowly said, "From now on, we will live and die together, and share glory and splendor." This sentence was heavier than, "I like you, I love you." There was also a sense of responsibility. It was even more tempting. Su Mingue's fake smile slowly faded. He stared at her blankly, not knowing how to react for a moment. Wei Wei Bai was very careful as she slipped the ring onto his ring finger. "Okay, today is the day of our engagement. It's also the day I'll tie you down." Saying this, her serious expression was swept away, and she revealed a sweet smile. Su Mingue barely managed to return to his senses. He knew that today was his best time to perform. Once Bai Qingshui acknowledged him as his son-in-law, then it would be easy to enter the Bai family corporation. After all, the Bai family was a family business. Blood ties and kinship were very important. He immediately steadied his mind, picked up the woman's ring, and knelt down on one knee. He held Wei Wei Bai's hand and looked up at her seriously. "Wei Wei, from today onwards, you are the only woman in my life. I will never leave you, and we will be together in life and death." These words were so sincere, it was as if they had been pulled out from the depths of his heart. After saying that, he slipped the ring onto her finger. Wei Wei Bai was moved to tears. She said to the system, "This drama queen is better than me. I didn't even think of kneeling on one knee." The system observed for a while before saying in a deep voice, "Don't feel inferior. You're the same. A great drama queen and a great drama queen, their path was simply full of twists and turns." Wei Wei Bai was relieved. He went down on one knee, and she decided to give him a kiss. Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate. She stretched out her hands to hold his face and lowered her head to kiss him deeply in front of everyone. Her eyelashes were half closed, and in her beautiful eyes, only the light and shadow of one person remained, flowing with a stunning brilliance. Su Mingue gazed at her and only saw pure emotion and joy in her eyes. Being liked by one person. So it was this kind of feeling. Su Mingue's reaction was slow for half a beat, but he already remembered how he should react. He showed an excited expression and kissed back. Everyone immediately stood up and applauded, blessing the newlyweds. Chapter 730. Bai Qingshui also said, Mengue and Weiwei are now engaged. Starting tomorrow, Mengue will start working at the Bai Group. No one objected. Su Mengue's plan was proceeding smoothly. But he wasn't happy in his heart. Instead, he felt depressed. He stood up, and Weiwei Bai clapped happily. We'll be a family in the future, Mengue. A family. Su Mengue saw Bai Qingshui's indifferent but appreciative gaze. And Weiwei Bai's undisguised happy smile. Full of kindness. His heart unconsciously skipped a few beats. It was like a beautiful dream. She had never experienced it before. The warmth of a family was just within reach. He slowly reached out, wanting to hug Weiwei Bai. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Su Mengue's fingers had just touched Weiwei Bai's shoulder. Bai Qingshui's expression suddenly changed. He clutched his chest and made a few difficult breathing sounds. Then he struggled to stand up. However, he fell to the ground and smashed the porcelain on the table. Weiwei Bai screamed, Dad. She rushed over. Su Mengue's fingers touched the air. He had also returned to reality, and the dreamy familial warmth from before had gradually disappeared. In the end, there was only cold pride in his eyes. The drug had taken effect. Bai Qingshui's heart wasn't good. As long as there was some special, undetectable drug to stimulate his body, he would immediately have a heart attack. And it couldn't be detected afterward. He suppressed the pride in his eyes and rushed over to help Bai Qingshui up, saying anxiously, Hurry to the hospital. Bai Qingshui quickly entered the intensive care unit. The situation wasn't good. Weiwei Bai sat in the corridor with an anxious expression. Her fingers trembled, and she was at a loss. After Su Mengue finished some admission procedures, he came to her side. Weiwei Bai hugged him and cried, Dad will be okay, right? Su Mengue's eyes were dark, but his voice was very soft. Nothing will happen. You still have me. Weiwei Bai hugged him even tighter. She nodded, relying on him. It was as if he was her salvation. Bai Qingshui's life was no longer in danger, but he fell into a coma. The doctor said that the lack of oxygen in the brain had led to this condition. They didn't know when he would wake up. Weiwei Bai received a huge blow and fainted. This frightened Su Mengue. He couldn't think of anything to be proud of or plan. All he could see was her falling body. Although the examination only showed excessive fatigue, it still made Su Mengue scared witless for a while. He left someone at the hospital to watch over Bai Qingshui and went home with Weiwei Bai. She slept peacefully in the soft bedding. His brows were tightly knitted, and there were traces of tears at the corners of his eyes. Su Mengue sat by the bed and carelessly stroked her cheek. He lowered his head to look at her, deep in thought. Weiwei Bai slept for more than 2 hours before she woke up. She immediately looked around in horror and found Su Mengue by her side. She immediately burrowed into his arms. Mengue, I had a nightmare. Su Mengue's gloomy eyes softened. I'm here. It's all right. Weiwei Bai choked out, I dreamed that Dad fainted and couldn't wake up. Su Mengue's fingers that were comforting her back stiffened and his expression turned cold. Of course, he quickly put away his indifference. He tried to comfort the poor little princess in his arms. It's all right. Dad will be all right. His voice was low and magnetic, especially pleasant to hear. It could also calm people down. Download the https://www.sashu Download the full article, https://www.sashu.com//. Download the full article, https://www.sashu.com. Download the mobile article, https://sashu.com. Chapter 731. Wei Wei Bai finally reacted. Bai Qingshui had indeed fallen. She looked up blankly, her eyes red. I only have you now, Mengue. There was unspeakable helplessness, but it was full of trust. Su Mengue pursed his lips and revealed a smile. Yes, you only have me. His fingers gently stroked the corners of her eyes. Her eyes were sorrowful but still without darkness. Her eyes were full of trust and dependence. How wonderful! The darkness in Su Mengue's heart emerged. When she had nothing, when she experienced the darkness of betrayal, would she be able to maintain such an innocent appearance? Su Mengue sneered in his heart. She would definitely be like him. Sooner or later, she would fall into a dirty quagmire. She would become a demon scheming against others. Su Mengue suppressed his subtle heartbeat. Wei Wei Bai was still chatting with the system. Is Bai Qingshui okay? System, he's fine now, but I don't know in the future. Wei Wei Bai, are there any discounted medicines? After I leave, let him wake up healthily. System, is letting him wake up healthily beneficial to the strategy? Wei Wei Bai, what good is there if I leave? Although there are no feelings, his daughter Khan appearance reminds me of my father. System, okay, I'll keep an eye out for discounted information for you. After that, the system said, the male lead is looking at you. Wei Wei Bai immediately showed a sad and pitiful expression, not letting Su Mengue see anything. Su Mengue patiently coaxed her to sleep. Until she fell asleep. He put away the gentle expression on his face, then walked to the living room and made a call to his people. Start the plan to destroy the Bai family's company. The person on the other side was clearly familiar with Su Mengue. I thought you were really going to be the Bai family's son-in-law. Isn't the Bai family's little princess very beautiful? Su Mengue frowned unhappily. Luo Langyue, let's talk business. Luo Langyue was his partner, equal in status. Luo Langyue, I'm ready. I'm just waiting for you to betray the Bai family and sell the Bai family to our company. Good luck. Su Mengue faintly grunted and was about to hang up. Luo Langyue said, oh right, when the Bai family collapses, can you lend me Wei Wei Bai? She's my type. Su Mengue's expression changed. His cold eyes were full of anger and murderous intent. He lowered his voice and said, shut off the messy thoughts in your head. If you can't shut them off, I don't mind helping you get rid of them. Luo Langyue was silent for a moment before he mocked, you're really moved. No way. Forget it, forget it. I won't talk to you anymore. Goodbye. With that, he hung up. But Su Mengue's eyes were still cold and fierce. He wasn't tempted. It was just that he hadn't seen Wei Wei Bai's miserable state with his own eyes. He wouldn't give it to anyone else. He convinced himself. Su Mengue returned to the room. However, he saw that Wei Wei Bai had already woken up. She was at a loss, but when she saw him, her eyes lit up. Then she stumbled out of bed in her bare feet. She immediately hugged him, and the girl's fragrance and soft body also crashed into his embrace. Su Mengue's body stiffened. Wei Wei Bai hugged him and innocently rubbed against him. Mengue, where did you go? Su Mengue said in a low voice, I went to drink water. Wei Wei Bai hugged him without letting go, saying aggrievedly, don't leave me. I'm scared. Su Mingue's lips slowly curved into a cold smile. Truly a delicate glass flower. Such a small setback had hit her like this. Su Mingue's face was immersed in the shadows, like a demon's. Chapter 732. You can search, Transmigration System, Male God, come to search web, www.sashu.com, in Baidu to find the. His voice was very gentle. Sleep, Wei Wei. I won't leave you. Wei Wei Bai nodded confidently and then obediently went to sleep. Her fingers gripped the corner of his clothes tightly, unwilling to let go. The mocking smile on Su Mingue's lips slowly disappeared. She quietly entrusted him as she slept, as if she knew he wouldn't hurt her. The girl's beautiful eyelashes covered her clear eyes, and her snow-white cheeks were stained with a blush. At a glance, it was the noble appearance of someone who had been pampered since childhood. He stared blankly at her, his fingers gently stroking her face. In the past, he never dared to hope that he could meet such a delicate girl. Just like many years ago, when he saw her in the garbage. The shame of a princess and a wild dog. It had accompanied him until now. Su Mingue said softly, do you know? Back then, you looked at me like I was a wild dog. Today, I came to your side to throw you into the garbage and change our identities. Those dirty words of hers back then. They had thoroughly become the inner demon of his shame. The Su family's revenge was over, and Bai Qingshui had fallen. The plan to destroy the Bai family company began. Then it would be revenge against Wei Wei Bai. Wait until all the people who made him feel shame were crushed into dust by him. He would certainly be able to obtain peace of mind and no longer be tormented by nightmares. Bai Qingshui slept for a week. The Bai family company began to fall into chaos because there was no leader. To maintain the company's affairs, Wei Wei Bai braced herself even though she didn't have any experience. A pile of documents, a pile of professional terms, and a pile of work. It left Wei Wei Bai battered and bruised. Every time she couldn't finish her work, she would look at Su Mingue. Su Mingue would always put on an act and sigh. Wei Wei, the company is yours. You have to take responsibility. When Bai Wei Wei heard this, her eyes welled up with tears. Her teary eyes could simply crush the hearts of others. She suddenly threw the folder out. I won't do it. I don't know how. Everyone is laughing at me. Then she leaned over the table, aggrieved. He looked even more pitiful. Su Mingue smiled helplessly. He picked up the folders and took out a pen to help her. Wei Wei Bai smiled. I knew you wouldn't abandon me. Su Mingue sighed. If you give me power like this, what will you do if I betray you one day? Wei Wei Bai looked at him gently and said seriously, it won't be you. Everyone in the world will betray me except you. The pen in Su Mingue's hand paused and drew a wrong line. He crossed out the wrong line as if nothing had happened and continued, what if I really betrayed you? Wei Wei Bai frowned and said, if you really betray me, I have no choice but to forgive you. Su Mingue looked up at her in a daze. Wei Wei Bai picked up a document and gently slapped it on his head, imitating his sigh helplessly. There's no choice. Who told me to like you so much? Like you so much that I can't help but want to forgive you when you betray me. Su Mingue looked at her delicate and innocent appearance. His fingers gripping the pen turned slightly white. He lowered his eyes. For a moment, he couldn't think of a way to respond to her confession. Perhaps these words were too naive, but at the same time, they were too beautiful. It made Su Mingue reluctant to part. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 25. // To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record your reading record. Chapter 733. Su Mengue answered the phone and stood by the glass window. It was raining outside. This is the biggest acquisition recently. If it succeeds, our company will officially become the overlord in this field. Luo Langhua said. Su Mengue's face was gloomy as he looked at the rain outside. He asked, "How many days are left?" Luo Langhua, 3 days. You've almost emptied the Bai family's foundation. The little princess of the Bai family still doesn't know. Su Mengue said expressionlessly, "In 3 days, we'll officially defeat the Bai family." Luo Langhua, what an indifferent guy. Su Mengue coldly hung up the phone. Then he turned around and walked to the side room. Wei Bai was lying on the sofa, hugging a cushion and sleeping. She had been very tired during this time, running between the hospital and the company. It was obvious that she was haggard. But she still looked like a beautiful white porcelain doll. The Bai family had raised her beautifully. Who knew how much effort it took? Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled. She opened her eyes and saw Su Mengue. He already had a gentle smile on his face. You're awake. Sleep more. I'll take care of the company's matters. Wei Bai sleepily rubbed her eyes. She was unspeakably cute. But there's a high-level meeting in a while. I heard that the acquisition that our family has been preparing for 3 years is about to come to an end. It's a meeting related to the Bai family's future. Su Mengue's smile deepened, and a trace of imperceptible coldness appeared in his eyes. It's fine. You still don't believe me. I can't bear to see you tired. I'll go for you. Wei Bai didn't hesitate and immediately pulled Su Mengue to the safe. This is the password. Remember it. Wei Bai pressed the numbers one by one for him to see. The safe was filled with the Bai family's most confidential documents, as well as all the Bai family's property documents. Including the house. Su Mengue looked at the cabinet full of wealth. He stared blankly at Wei Bai, only to find that she didn't treat him as an outsider at all. Mengue, this is all of our family's property. Dad said that no one can know the password except for our own family. Wei Bai pulled out a few documents from inside and then reached out to Su Mengue. Pen. Su Mengue's fingers trembled, his eyes carrying traces of shock. Wei Bai frowned and nudged him with her shoulder. What's wrong? Why are you in a daze? Su Mengue hid the emotions in his eyes and gave her a pen. Wei Bai took the pen and signed the documents. Then she stuffed the document into Su Mengue's hands. This is the document for the president's agent. In the future, you will be the president's agent of the Bai family company. You can make any decisions. Su Mengue took these pages of paper and entered the Bai family. In fact, he thought that there would be a tough battle ahead of him. Even if Bai Qingshui had fallen. However, the Bai family company had been in business for many years, and it would take time and energy to bring it down. But Wei Bai had so easily handed over the entire company to him. Now, as long as he had a thought, the Bai family company would no longer exist. And not just the Bai family company, but her entire family's wealth was spread out in front of him. Su Mengue pinched those pages. These were clearly the things he tried to get his hands on. But why didn't he feel any sense of accomplishment? Was it too easy? Su Mengue finally couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "You're so assured about me." Wei Bai closed the safe, her expression natural. What's there to be assured about? We're family. Slash. Chapter 734. Wei Bai felt that her life was really comfortable. Eat and sleep, sleep and play, occasionally flipping through documents and signing a few names. Then she continued to tease Su Mengue. Ah, life was so beautiful. The system looked at the dry 30 favorability points and could only knock on the host's head. Work hard struggle move forward Why was the host always eating and waiting to die? Wei Wei Bai looked at the manga. Isn't there Su Mengue working hard? Su Mengue's experience was simply a classic example of life's counterattack. Every minute, every second, he was working hard, playing the pig to eat the tiger, plus winning every battle. System, no, it's only 30 favorability points. Your family is going to be ruined. You should get more favorability points before it's ruined. When the Bai family is finished, he'll drive you out and you won't be able to see him. Wei Wei Bai was very calm. You don't understand. System, ? Wei Wei Bai, Su Mengue came to ruin the Bai family. If I don't let him ruin it, he'll be plotting every day and can't vent. He won't have time to increase the favorability points. System, but if the Bai family collapses, you won't have any interaction. I think you should do it this way. You immediately become a business genius and fight with him. He can only look at you and think about you. In the end, you'll destroy all the companies and become the overlord of the world. The male lead will naturally worship you and admire you. Wei Wei Bai, you've read too many novels. There's only 2 months left. How can I become the overlord of the world? The system immediately pulled out the advertisement. Model of a business overlord. 1 day to kill Tao Bao, 3 days to fight Penguin, 10 days to ride on top of Wei Ruo. Father Ma isn't a dream. Father Tang is under your feet. You're the world's richest man. As long as you have 15 life points, you can take me home. Wei Wei Bai, system, how about it? It's fresh and on sale. It's still hot. Wei Wei Bai silently read the manga. No, I'll just eat, drink, and play. The system was exasperated. How can you eat, drink, and play? Where's your drive? Where are your best acting skills? What happened to your messy tricks? He had never seen a plane with such a negative host. Which plane didn't start with one trick after another? For this plane, half of the time had already passed, and the host was still being passive. Wei Wei Bai turned over and pretended not to hear anything as she continued reading her manga. The system cried, Host, you've changed. You're no longer the host who always had to kill me, kill the male lead, and kill the entire world. Suddenly, a phone call came. Wei Wei Bai answered the phone lazily. It was a man named Shen Anming who asked her out. After answering the phone, Wei Wei Bai frowned and said, Shen Anming, I remember that he's someone that the original owner knows. The system flipped through the information. Oh, he's not a good person. He keeps thinking about the original owner's beauty. He's the original owner's classmate. The original owner also went to university. He just skipped classes every day and basically didn't go to school. Wei Wei Bai immediately got up and went to change her clothes. Then, she dressed up delicately. He left the house and headed straight for the rendezvous point. System, what are you in such a hurry for? Wei Wei Bai, don't you want a trick? I'm going out to do a trick. They arrived at the rendezvous location. Shen Anming's eyes lit up and he immediately greeted her. Wei Wei, you're finally willing to see me. Shen Anming was good-looking. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes, and the lines of his face were sharp. Although he wasn't as gentle and delicate as Su Mengue, he was quite manly. Next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it. If you like. Chapter 735. You can search Transmigration System, Male God, Come to search web, www.sashu.com, in Baidu to find the Weiwei Bai glanced at the location. It was a private high-end bar. What do you want to say by asking me to come? Shen Anming was stung by her cold gaze and cowered. He had always liked Weiwei Bai, but she never liked him. She even chose Su Mengue as her fiancé, which made him so angry that he smashed a room full of things. But thinking of what he was going to say later, his mood improved. Shen Anming reached out, wanting to touch Weiwei Bai's white and slender fingers. Weiwei, listen to me. There's a problem with your fiancé. Weiwei Bai indifferently moved her fingers away, letting him touch the air. Then she raised her eyes full of ice. If you're here to slander my fiancé, then I'm leaving. Seeing that she was leaving, Shen Anming became anxious and immediately took out a pile of documents. It's true. I took this out of my father's safe. This is the document Su Mengue cooperated with him. He said he wanted to bring down the Bai family together. Weiwei Bai's body stiffened, and her expression froze. Shen Anming thought he had a chance. He immediately flipped through the documents. Look, the big case your family wants to buy has been leaked. It's lost before it even started, and many companies belonging to the Bai family are in trouble. Weiwei Bai's fingers clenched. Impossible. I gave the company to Mengue to manage. There won't be any problems with the company. Shen Anming immediately said, this is evidence. Look, there's a bunch of schemes to bring down the Bai family. For example, tax evasion, scandals, and so on. These are all common framing methods. Weiwei Bai frowned, her face pale. She looked at the documents in his hands, her lips trembling. Is what you said true? Su Mengue, who had just arrived, heard this. He had installed a bug on Weiwei Bai's clothes, so he heard everything she said when she went out on a date. When he heard that she went out on a date, he didn't know why he felt anxious. So, he rushed over from the company. In fact, even if Weiwei Bai knew about it, there was no chance for her to salvage the situation. All of his deployments were successful. Without Bai Qingshui turning the tide, the Bai family's failure was already destined. He could leisurely watch her fall. But when he heard that she was going on a date with a man, he couldn't help but rush over. Then he saw that her face was pale as she looked at the document in Shen Anming's hand. She didn't even notice that the man had secretly reached out and touched her fingertips. Shen Anming couldn't wait to have Su Mengue scram. He hurriedly said, Weiwei, I risked being beaten to death by my dad to steal the document for you. You'll know with one look. Weiwei Bai's face turned even paler. She pursed her lips. I don't believe you. Shen Anming, it's Su Mengue. He doesn't have good intentions. You'll know when you see. For some reason, Su Mengue didn't step forward to stop him. It was good to know in advance so that he could be mentally prepared. Otherwise, if he waited until the day the Bai family collapsed to find out, it would be even more painful. Su Mengue leaned against the bar by the door, his eyes gloomy as he looked at Weiwei Bai. He took out a cigarette. He didn't smoke unless he was extremely irritated. But now he really wanted to smoke, even for no reason. He had just lit the cigarette and took a puff when he saw Weiwei Bai suddenly stand up. She took the document from Shen Anming's hand. Su Mengue smiled coldly. He was finally going to unveil the true face of this big bad wolf. Poor little princess. // Download the mobile article at https://sashu.com to facilitate your next reading. You can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 736. But the next second, Wei Wei Bai fiercely waved her hand and threw the document in her hand at Shen Anming's head. Shen Anming cried out in alarm. Wei Wei Bai picked up another glass of wine and poured it on his head. Shen Anming hurriedly covered his face and cried out a few times. Wei Wei Bai raised her chin and looked at him coldly, her eyes bursting with dazzling anger. Surnamed Shen, don't think I don't know your dirty thoughts. Su Mengue is my man. I believe him. Who do you think you are? With that, she smashed the glass and took out a piece, her expression arrogant. Next time, if you dare to frame him again, I will cut your neck. With that, Wei Wei Bai threw away the glass shards, picked up her bag, and was just about to leave. But she saw Su Mengue standing at the door, staring at her in a daze. Wei Wei Bai immediately thought of her fierce appearance just now and felt guilty. Why are you here? I'm not usually fierce. Today was an accident. This little wife's appearance was different from when she defended him just now. They weren't the same person at all. The cigarette in Su Mengue's hand was crushed. He said in a hoarse voice, what if what he said is true? Wei Wei Bai stepped forward, took his hand, and walked out. Okay, don't joke around. I know you're angry that I came to meet a man in private, but I swear, there's really nothing between him and me. Su Mengue's voice trembled. You really believe me? The evidence was clearly in her hands, but she threw it away without hesitation. Wei Wei Bai walked out the door and welcomed the sunlight. Her smile was as warm and pure as the sun. You're my favorite person. In this world, if I don't believe you, who else would I believe? From her clear and smiling eyes, Su Mengue saw only gentle trust and love. He'd never felt such feelings before. Just like that, they suddenly broke into his life. Such pure trust, and the kind of thing where you could give up everything when you liked someone. He'd never experienced it. Su Mengue felt his heartbeat go out of control again. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 40. Su Mengue returned home with Wei Wei Bai. He followed her with a complicated expression. She called the hospital and listened carefully to Bai Qingshui's condition. She then went to the safe and took out some folders. She gave them to him, saying that there were some important and secret assets of the Bai family company that needed to be managed. For the first time, Su Mengue couldn't say that she was stupid. He didn't feel that these things were easy, but he felt that the documents were particularly heavy. Holding them in his hand, for the first time, he wanted to throw them away. Su Mengue received another call from Luo Langyue. Tomorrow will be the end of the opportunity. Just wait for the fruits of victory. Tomorrow, the Bai family company would fall into bankruptcy on all sides. There was no turning back. Su Mengue was silent for a moment. Can't stop it. After saying that, he immediately clenched his teeth. What kind of stupid thing did he say? Since they had already come this far, there was no way for them to back out. When Luo Langyue heard this, he said, no way. This isn't something you would say. How can you stop? You can't stop even if you want to. This situation had been planned by Su Mengue. If he hadn't controlled all the power in the Bai family, how could he have so easily destroyed the Bai family? Su Mengue said coldly, then proceed according to the plan. With that, he hung up the phone. Then he turned around and saw Wei Wei Bai standing behind him with a wine bottle in hand, looking at him. Su Mengue's pupils shrank. How much did she hear? Chapter 737. Wei Wei Bai held the wine bottle and glass. I can't sleep, so I can only have you drink with me. It was red wine. For a girl, drinking a glass before going to bed was good for sleep quality. The tension in Su Mengue's heart relaxed. Didn't she hear his call? Su Mengue accompanied Wei Wei Bai to drink. Then he took the wine bottle. Okay, you can't drink too much. Go to sleep. Wei Wei Bai complained, why are you controlling me like my father? Su Mengue was helpless. Controlling you isn't because I care about you. Wei Wei Bai immediately cheered up. You're so good, Mengue. Under the light, her smile was especially beautiful. Su Mengue shifted his gaze, and his chest tightened again. Wei Wei Bai suddenly asked in a soft voice, Mengue, you won't lie to me, right? Su Mengue paused. Seeing her forcing a smile, although her voice was soft, there was a trace of hesitation as she shrank back. His fingers pressed hard on the wine bottle, his eyes lowered, and he didn't speak. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss. She drank a glass of red wine and then said, of course you won't lie to me. I know. Su Mengue subconsciously clenched his fingers. Tomorrow, the Bai family would completely collapse. Everything she had would be taken away by him. When he wanted to retaliate against the Bai family, he had imagined this scene many times. Wei Wei Bai would become a drowning dog. He would be high up, coldly looking down on her. That kind of mood would definitely be very pleasurable. Now he only needed to say, I'm lying to you. He would definitely send her to hell. Wei Wei Bai seemed to think she was ridiculous. She suddenly laughed. I'm really paranoid. Others want to drive a wedge between us, but I actually asked such a stupid question. Mengue, give me another glass of wine. Red wine isn't intoxicating. Su Mengue hesitated before pouring her a glass. Wei Wei Bai downed it in one gulp. Her face was a little red, and her eyes were misty. She said she wasn't drunk, but she was seductive. Su Mengue's eyes were dark. If someone betrays you, will you forgive them? Wei Wei Bai tilted her head in confusion. She frowned and slammed the table. I won't forgive you. You betrayed me and you still want to celebrate the new year. Of course, I want that person who betrayed me to scram as far away as possible. For some reason, these words made him feel an indescribable sense of oppression and irritation. Su Mengue sneered. How could he expect her to say words of forgiveness? Wei Wei Bai blinked her eyes and then laid down on the table. Before she closed her eyes and fell asleep, she still struggled to reach out and pull on his sleeve. But I won't be sad no matter who betrays me, as long as it's not you. Her tone was soft and pitiful. It was an indescribable heartache. His heart ached. Su Mengue's face darkened. He actually felt heartache for her. As if he was avoiding the plague, he immediately shook off her hand. Wei Wei Bai was already drunk from the 2 glasses of red wine. She closed her eyes and breathed evenly. Su Mengue had already stood up, his chest heaving as he looked at her with difficulty. All kinds of complicated emotions flashed through his eyes, but in the end, indifference prevailed. He slowly stood up, revealing a cold smile. He reached out and gently stroked her soft and beautiful black hair. Then he said in a low voice, unfortunately, I betrayed you. Tomorrow, you'll know the feeling of your entire world collapsing. At that time, you'll be the wild dog, and I'll be the one to beat the dog when it's down. The Bai family's oppression caused the Su family to abuse him in every way possible. And Wei Wei Bai was actually the person who had the least connection to him. / next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it. If you like, comma. Chapter 738. But for some reason, every time he was in unbearable pain, his nightmares were of her high above him, giving him a clean glance. That gaze was like looking at a wild dog. It simply turned him into a demon, wanting to beat her into the dirty water. Only when he grew up did he realize that there was a problem in his heart. He should have been jealous. He was jealous that Wei Wei Bai had a beautiful family, parents who doted on her, and never had to face any darkness. But he stayed in hell, living worse than a dog. So after he took revenge on everyone he could take revenge on, his heart still couldn't calm down. Only then did he begin to want to pull her into the quagmire. Make her fall, become selfish, dark, and unscrupulous. At that time, he should be able to live happily. Su Mengue smiled. But for some reason, his heart was somewhat gloomy. After Wei Wei Bai woke up, her neck hurt from sleeping. She had been lying on the table all night. No wonder her body wasn't right. She looked around the house and found that Su Mengue was gone. She said to the system, "Has my company collapsed?" System, collapsed. Wei Wei Bai, finally collapsed. After it collapses, Su Mengue will know that after taking revenge on me, his heart won't be able to calm down. He'll start to have feelings for me. At that time, the favorability will increase rapidly. System, can't it be that he's so happy after taking revenge that he'll forget about you in the blink of an eye? Wei Wei Bai absent-mindedly flipped her long hair, then winked seductively. My charm can definitely make him fall head over heels for me. That's why he can't forget me. The system rubbed its eyes, racking its brains to not blindly buy things. It didn't even have eye drops, so it could only be captivated by its host. Wei Wei Bai, seriously, revenge can't calm a person's heart. The more you take revenge, the more uncomfortable you feel. Therefore, after he took his revenge on me, he would feel that he had done something wrong and would feel guilty. I would struggle for a while as a transition, and in the end, would have no choice but to succumb to my feelings for him. I would forgive him and love him, and my favorability would naturally increase. System, what the fuck, the company was destroyed, but she still loved and forgave him so much. Let it sort out the story of this scumbag man and bitch. Wei Wei Bai patted her face. Alright, let's get down to business. With that, she turned on the television. Sure enough, she saw the news that the Bai Group was officially disbanded. Scandals, financial deficits, and debt. The employees were fired and the company's top management was chased out. There was also the news that the company would be officially acquired by the mysterious multinational company, M Group. Wei Wei Bai stood up in shock and walked around in front of the hidden surveillance camera. She let Su Mengue see the confusion, helplessness, doubt, and fear on her face. She shouted, "Impossible." With that, she ran out like a madwoman. Sitting in the president's office of the Bai Group, Su Mengue watched Wei Wei Bai on the monitor. He pursed his lips, his hands tightly clenched. He had clearly won, so why didn't he feel happy at all? He made a phone call. Watch the young miss for me. When she arrives at the company, don't stop her. He originally wanted to set up a barrier so that she couldn't enter and humiliate her. But Su Mengue didn't have this thought for a while. The door opened, and a handsome man in a blue suit with short brown hair walked in. What's wrong? Why is your face so gloomy on the day of victory? Can't you be happier? Luo Langue said with a grin. Slash. Chapter 739. Su Mengue looked at him indifferently, then lowered his head and continued to sign documents. These documents were the property transfer documents of the Bai family. He signed his name on behalf of the company, the house, the land, and all kinds of private property. It was all his. Wei Wei Bai had nothing now. Wei Wei Bai rushed to the company and found that her family's sign had been removed. A bunch of employees were hanging a new sign. A big M stung her eyes. She rushed into the elevator on the first floor in disbelief and pressed the button for the top floor. When she reached the top floor, she found that everyone was a stranger. The familiar elders of the Bai family were gone. Such young people, each with a joyful expression, were newly promoted employees from M Group to take charge of the new company. A secretary-like employee came over. "Who are you? Do you have an appointment?" Wei Wei Bai pushed him away and said with a cold face, "This is my family's company. Why would I need an appointment?" With that, she broke into the CEO's office. The office was very large. By the huge floor-to-ceiling window, a slender and beautiful man in a black suit stood there. His eyes were cold, and his face was stern. The familiar gentleness was gone, only leaving behind a strange chill. Wei Wei Bai's footsteps paused, her voice trembling. "Mengue, they said the company collapsed, but I didn't believe it. You're clearly still here." Even if it was obvious to this extent, she still chose to believe him. Su Mengue looked at her, coldly sizing her up, and suddenly snorted. "Yes, I'm still here. Maybe it's because I'm the leader of M Group." These words were filled with unspeakable malice. But it was enough to completely crush Wei Wei Bai's naive trust. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was seeing him for the first time, unspeakably unfamiliar. She stood by the door in a daze. Because she had rushed out, she hadn't had time to tidy up. Her long hair hung in messy curls below her shoulders, with cute little flowers in her bangs. She wore pastel pajamas and animal-shaped slippers. She was soft and cute, like a little rabbit that had been dragged out of its warm nest. Her face was full of panic and helplessness. It actually made people feel a sense of pity for him. Su Mengue had all kinds of vicious words in his mouth, but not a single one left his mouth. He unconsciously clenched his fists in his pocket. Wei Wei Bai suddenly looked up and said through gritted teeth, "I don't believe you. I don't believe anything you say." Her eyes were filled with tears as she kept saying, "I won't believe you. You're lying to me. The company didn't collapse, and it wasn't bought." Su Mengue laughed mockingly. He took out a cigarette, his fingers trembling. "You're so stupid. Wei Wei Bai, I've never liked you. I only came to your house to destroy the Bai Group. After all, all's fair in war. If my company wants to become the king in this field, I can only crush others by any means." That was clearly not what he wanted to say. Instead, he taunted her, mocked her, and told her that he was deliberately making her suffer. That was why the Bai family's company collapsed. But when it came out of his mouth, it felt more like he was explaining his motives. And this motive was made up on the spot. Wei Wei Bai staggered back a few steps. She looked at Su Mengue in a daze. "You don't like me." Su Mengue didn't know why, but his neck was a little stiff, but he still nodded. Wei Wei Bai cried out, "I don't believe it. If you don't like me, how can you be so gentle to me? You risked your life to save me, love me, and spoil me. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. // transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here." Download the mobile article at https://m/sashu.com to facilitate your next reading. You can click on the button at the bottom to record the reading record. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 740. You can search Transmigration system, male god, come to search web, www.sashu.com, in Baidu to find the irritation in Su Mengue's heart turned into a sharp pain. His eyes hardened and he sneered. "That was to get your family's company. I didn't expect you to be so stupid as to be tricked with just a few simple words of sweet talk." Wei Wei Bai's voice grew angry. "That's because you said it. I believed you." Saying this, she cried out, desperately wiping her tears as she cried. I believed you. I like you. Su Mengue, I like you. I like you, one sentence after another. Like weeping blood. Full of desperate pain. Trembling with unwillingness. Like a moth to a flame. Even when death was at hand, she still rushed into the flames without hesitation. Su Mengue had never felt such intense and decisive emotions. For a moment, his mind was blank. He only saw her face full of tears as she kept saying that she liked him. He instinctively took a few steps forward and reached out to touch her, wanting her to stop crying. Crying until he didn't feel the pleasure of revenge at all. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 45. But when his hand was halfway out, a teasing voice came from the side. Io, you're crying so pitifully. Su Mengue, that big bad wolf who doesn't know how to be tender to the fairer sex, doesn't want you. Do you want to consider following me? This sentence completely broke the fragile balance of the atmosphere. It wasn't just Su Mengue who was startled awake. There was also Wei Bai. She blankly looked to the side. She discovered that there was another man. That man was Luo Langyue. She had seen the news before. When M Group was growing, Luo Langyue was an important member of M Group. Luo Langyue said with some surprise, "You know me." Saying this, he ran to Su Mengue's side and patted him on the shoulder. "This is my boss, Su Mengue." He chuckled. "My boss is amazing." To get your family's company, he deliberately pretended to be an honest person to deceive your feelings. "Today is the day we take over the company. We're holding a celebration banquet. Do you want to attend?" Wei Bai's face was pale. She suddenly smiled. It was as if she had just woken up from a dream. The emotion on her face had disappeared, and she looked at Su Mengue with cold eyes and anger. "Then I really must congratulate you, Su Mengue." Su Mengue's body trembled. His expression remained calm, but his voice was somewhat unstable. "You can indeed stay. After all, the new company needs new employees. I can give you a higher position." This was clearly not what he wanted to say. He should have mocked her and told her to scram. This made her even more miserable. However, the words that came out of his mouth sounded like he was trying to salvage the situation. This made Su Mengue shut his mouth with an ugly expression. However, Wei Bai seemed to have heard a joke. She laughed in a low voice and suddenly walked in front of him. Then she raised her hand and slapped him hard and fast. This slap was decisive and did not leave any room for negotiation. It was a pain that truly penetrated the flesh. Su Mengue frowned. The corner of his mouth had been hit by the slap, scraping his teeth and bleeding. Wei Bai's eyes were filled with anger and grief. "Just take it that I'm blind. I'm really blind. Su Mengue, the thing I regret most in my life is liking you." Saying this, she turned to leave. Su Mengue didn't think much of it and reached out to grab her wrist. But Wei Bai shook him off, her eyes chilling to the bone. "Scram, don't touch me." Su Mengue's fingers stiffened. She had already run out. // Chapter 741. He immediately chased after her, but Luo Langyue frowned and grabbed his clothes. "Wait, what are you doing? Don't you want revenge? Why do I feel like you guys are so melodramatic? Didn't you say you wanted to make Wei Bai suffer? It looks like you're in more pain." Su Mengue paused, his eyes gloomy as he looked at Luo Langyue. Luo Langyue immediately let go and silently retreated. What a terrifying gaze. Why was it like he wanted to eat someone? Wei Bai flew out of the company before her expression returned to normal. "How was the acting just now?" The system said, "I'm stunned by this dog blood. Wei Wei Bai, it would be better if there was a rainstorm to set off my miserable mood." Just as she finished speaking, rumble. Dark clouds covered the sky and heavy rain poured down. Wei Wei Bai stood in the rain, her face splashed with MMP. She silently reached out to wipe the rain off her face. The heavy rain hurt her skin. The rain came as she wished. If she didn't know that the system was stingy, it would rather buy instant noodles than spend it on her. She thought it was the system's doing. Wei Wei Bai said, "Next, I'll run wildly in the rain, then cry beautifully and romantically. Then I'll faint and have a fever. Then I'll be rescued by Su Mengue. Then I'll do still feeling or something. The favorability will be fine." System, isn't this still feeling too stiff? His father had been framed and his company had been sold. Now, he was forgiven just because he had a fever. This plot was too stiff. Wei Wei Bai, yeah, it's stiff. I'm happy. It was fine as long as the favorability increased. System, it forgot that the host's shameless personality was its fault. System, the male lead has caught up. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed in a second. Her face was deathly pale as she stood in the rain, haggard and dazed. Her slender body couldn't straighten up from the heavy rain. It looked like she would fall down in the next second. Su Mengue took an umbrella from the entrance of the company and rushed over in the rain without opening it. But before he could reach her, he was sobered up by the rain. He stopped in his tracks and looked at Bai Weiwei blankly. The company had been bought by him, the Bai family had been taken over by him, and Bai Qingshui had collapsed in the hospital. Weiwei Bai was also on the verge of breaking down. He had already retaliated to this extent, but his heart was empty and he didn't feel happy at all. Was his revenge not ruthless enough? Bai Weiwei suddenly staggered 2 steps, and her whole body fell forward. Su Mengue didn't think much of it. He rushed out, grabbed her waist, and pulled her into his arms. Weiwei Bai blinked her eyes. She couldn't tell if it was rain or tears. When she saw that it was Su Mengue, her face turned pale and she began to struggle. "Let go. What else do you want? Are you going to force me to death before I'm satisfied?" Su Mengue was silent, not knowing what to say for a moment. Was he going to continue taking revenge on her, or was he going to do something else? This was the first time he had been so hesitant about something. Weiwei Bai didn't want to talk nonsense with him. She pried open his hand and walked forward. She didn't take more than a few steps before her whole body fell to the ground. Su Mengue's expression changed greatly. He immediately rushed out and picked her up. He found that she was burning hot and her limbs were trembling. Su Mengue carried her to the company's garage and drove her home. Weiwei Bai's fever was unbearable, but things were going smoothly. She had the leisure to say to the system, "Sure enough, taking a cold shower in advance is effective /." Chapter 742. Su Mengue stood by the bed in a daze. He reached out and gently touched his lips. Her taste was on his lips. Soft, with the lingering warmth of a fever. There was a kind of palpitation that he couldn't escape from. Su Mengue suddenly smiled, his smile somewhat distorted. He couldn't deceive himself anymore. He actually liked her a little. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 50. Su Mengue suppressed the emotions in his heart. Rest well. I'll have the kitchen cook some porridge for you. Saying this, he turned around with a gloomy face, wanting to sort out his messy thoughts. Weiwei Bai suddenly called out to him in a trembling voice, "Su Mengue." Su Mengue stopped but didn't turn around. Weiwei Bai called out again, "Su Mengue." Su Mengue couldn't resist the call of her voice and couldn't help but turn around. But he saw her teary-eyed and hatefully looking at him. Did you like me? This question was asked in a sad and stubborn tone, but there was a bit of expectation in it. Su Mengue pinched his fingers and couldn't help but look forward to something. Wei Wei Bai continued to work hard, forcibly changing the plot and passing this melodramatic sadomasochistic love. Then it would return to the sweet plot of brushing up favorability. After all, Su Mengue had already gotten his revenge and knew that revenge couldn't make him feel good. So when it came to brushing up favorability in the future, Su Mengue, who didn't have heart demons, would be particularly easy to do. Her eyes couldn't help but become more aggrieved. Then she dejectedly lowered her head, clutching the sheets with both hands. No. That's right, I actually expected you to like me. I'm so cheap. Su Mengue stiffened and held his breath for a moment. Finally, he relaxed. Then he clenched his jaw and moved his lips with difficulty. A faint word. Admitting defeat. Su Mengue even felt that this word had cost him so many years of courage. Letting go of his obsession with revenge. Overthrowing all the crazy darkness in his heart. Only then could he say it. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 60. As he listened to the favorability climbing up, he felt a chill down his spine. Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. She had finally survived the sadomasochism and arrived at the sweet chapter. She adjusted her expression, intending to show a struggling expression to forgive him. In the end, just as he was about to reveal an expression of surprise mixed with helplessness and sadness. Ding, detected scumbag man and cheap girl plot. The main system refuses to accept this type of plot. Wei Wei Bai, ? Daughters should strive for self-improvement, while men are dogs. Scum Abuse Index activated. Host, please complete the side mission, Scum Abuse Index. Just as he finished speaking, a huge number appeared above Wei Wei Bai's head. 20. Before you complete the Scum Abuse Index, you are not allowed to have any good feelings for scum men, you are not allowed to flirt with scum men, and you are not allowed to forgive scum men in any way. Scum Abuse Index has dropped to 0. Failed. Upgrade to 90. Completed. Side mission failed. Host, please run happily on the beautiful grassland and kill 100 Tibetan Mastiffs. Wei Wei Bai, wait a minute, abusing trash was still within the scope of human understanding. But what the hell was the punishment for failure? What's with biting a Tibetan Mastiff to death? Who did the Tibetan Mastiff provoke that she had to bite it? It wasn't enough to abuse single dogs on a daily basis. Now she had to kill real dogs. Wei Wei Bai was so angry by this side mission that she almost passed out on the spot. Then she saw the 20 Scum Abuse Index above her head suddenly and slowly decrease. Wei Wei Bai looked up in horror and saw Su Mengue's gaze soften as he gazed at her, //. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 743. His eyes were filled with tenderness and expectation. Seeing that she didn't immediately refuse, his heart was filled with hope. Wei Wei Bai silently shed tears in her heart. After a moment of silence, she finally resigned herself to her fate and got out of bed. She walked in front of Su Mengue and looked up at him. Her beautiful eyes revealed traces of affection. You like me. This sentence was a statement. Su Mengue's heart was filled with hope. He couldn't suppress the trace of joy on his face. Perhaps letting go of everything and starting over to obtain her forgiveness was the best result. He slowly nodded. I like you, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai revealed a lovely smile. I also like you, Su Mingue's heart beat wildly. He was about to reach out and hug her. Wei Wei Bai was already smiling brightly. You didn't think I would say that, did you? How ridiculous. Su Mingue stiffened and stared at her in a daze. Wei Wei Bai's smile sharpened. She raised her chin, as proud as a white swan. Her eyes were like knives, cold to the bone. Su Mingue, I will never forgive you in this life. Your liking is worthless. Slag Abuse Index, 25. Su Mingue's expression was calm, but his complexion was deathly pale. His eyes began to turn bloodshot, like a trapped beast, but his voice was still calm. Wei Wei, don't say things you'll regret. These words were like a warning. More like a plea. Wei Wei Bai mocked, what I regret the most is liking you and trusting you. But I won't do it in the future. She enunciated each word clearly. I don't like you anymore. I don't trust you. Get out of my house right now. Su Mingue's mind was empty for a moment. He thought he would go crazy when he heard these words. But he didn't. His heart was a little empty. He even wanted to shrink back and run away in a sorry state. Slag Abuse Index, 30. Su Mingue's fingers trembled. He reached out, wanting to grab her. But Wei Wei Bai coldly slapped his hand away. Her action clearly wasn't a threat to him. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. Wei Wei Bai's expression was cold. You really disgust me. Su Mingue stiffened and didn't refute a single word. For the first time, he knew what it meant to hurt the heart with words. His heart felt like it was being ripped apart. It was different from the humiliation that came from abuse, and it was also different from physical pain. Instead, it hurt even more. He was in so much pain that he didn't know what to do. The trembling in Su Mingue's eyes was covered by an unyielding calmness. He retreated a few steps and suddenly revealed a mocking smile. You want me to get out of here? His mocking smile became even more obvious. The Bai family has long become my property. This house, the servants here, including the carpet you're standing on, all belong to me. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. Su Mingue gritted his teeth and said in a hoarse voice, so what right do you have to drive me out? This place is mine. Wei Wei Bai's smile disappeared. She looked at him with hatred. You win. Su Mingue, then I'll scram. With that, Wei Wei Bai turned around and left. But Su Mingue suddenly said, I didn't tell you to scram. Wei Wei Bai didn't look back. She sneered with a pale face. I'm disgusted when I'm with you. Scum Abuse Index, 35. With that, Wei Wei Bai walked out of the Bai family without a trace of desire to look back. Su Mingue didn't chase after her. He stood in place for a long time before looking down at his surroundings. This was Wei Wei Bai's room. There were traces of her everywhere. After looking around, he suddenly calmly rolled up his sleeves, picked up something, and smashed it. Her room was smashed to smithereens. In the end, he stopped and crouched down, covering his face with one hand. This was the first time he had confessed to a girl. Com / comma. Chapter 744. After Wei Wei Bai left the Bai family, she was completely dispirited. She was completely dispirited as she said, Tongzi, I forgot to bring money. System, you can faint again and have the male lead pick you up again. Wei Wei Bai, am I the kind of person who slaps someone's face and still has the cheek to go back? System, no money, no place to live, no food. My body's fever just subsided, and it's already late at night. If I encounter a few hooligans or something, Wei Wei Bai turned around. She'd better go back and faint again in front of the Bai family's house. Halfway through, she saw a few bodyguards running out from the Bai family's house. Wei Wei Bai immediately pretended not to see and turned around to walk forward. It's at least 60 favorability. Su Mengue even had people follow me. I'm not afraid of hooligans. System, do you need to change your face so quickly? Wei Wei Bai really didn't bring anything. In the dark night, there was a damp aura in the air. Fortunately, the storm had stopped. Otherwise, her body probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. Wei Wei Bai was thinking about the next strategy and some plans to abuse the scum. It was too difficult to torture a man into a dog and increase his favorability towards her. Wei Wei Bai thought about it and walked toward the hospital. Without money, there was no way to hitch a ride. Wei Wei Bai slowly walked for more than an hour. Only then did she reach the hospital and find Bai Qingshui's ward. Bai Qingshui's ward was still that luxurious single room. It seemed that Su Mengue wasn't crazy enough to kill Bai Qingshui. She knew that this ward had a monitor, so she cried in front of Bai Qingshui. She cried silently, but her cries made people's hearts twist into a mess. Wei Wei Bai desperately wiped her tears with her sleeve. I'm sorry, Dad. I lost your company. This is your life's work. Because I fell in love with a bastard, the Bai family lost everything. She choked pitifully, completely without the coldness she had in front of Su Mengue. If only I didn't fall in love with him. If only I hadn't fallen in love with him, she scolded herself again and again. In the monitor, she was sitting sideways. Her body was bent over unbearably, and her nose was red from crying. She looked so aggrieved and fragile that it made people hate and feel sorry for her. Su Mengue crossed his hands and gripped them tightly. His eyes were dark and filled with an inexplicable emotion. In the end, he stretched out his finger and gently stroked her figure on the monitor. When she loved him, her smile could give him the whole world. Now that she hated him, every word she said could stab him in the heart. Su Mengue suddenly turned off the monitor. His face was gloomy, and his breathing was somewhat disorderly. His fingers couldn't help but caress her. It was as if he could feel the delicate feel of her skin, as well as her sweet and beautiful appearance when she smiled at him. His heart was beating uneasily. Su Mengue coldly said to himself, "Calm down. She's just one of your mistakes." It was obvious that he wanted revenge. They wanted to rob the Bai family of their resources. He wanted to calm his twisted heart. Not like this, where he was utterly defeated because of a Wei Wei Bai. Su Mengue picked up the phone and gave orders to his subordinates. Bai Qingshui will still give him the best medical treatment. Also, transfer the Bai family's house to Wei Wei Bai's name. Su Mengue had taken everything from Wei Wei Bai. She had nothing now. But seeing her alone, before she recovered from her illness, without even the money for a ride. Step by step, he walked to the hospital. He was so irritable and uncomfortable that he couldn't even sit still. Chapter 745. Su Mengue felt that since the Bai family had been taken away by him, he had succeeded. He took pity on Wei Wei Bai and gave her an arrangement so that she had a place to go. But after doing all this, he still felt uncomfortable. Su Mengue stood up and walked out of the Bai family, looking up at the house. Then he resisted the urge to go back and turned to leave without hesitation. He had been like this since he was a child, indifferent all the way. He wouldn't miss anyone. His untimely love for Wei Wei Bai was just an impulse. If they didn't meet, it would disappear quickly. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she was notified that the Bai family's house had been returned. The medical bills were all taken care of. Wei Wei Bai said regretfully, "Why is it different from what I thought?" "System, what do you want?" "Wei Wei Bai, am I not a little pitiful girl with nothing?" Su Mengue can use by Qingshui to threaten me. For example, a little melodramatic, woman, if you don't return to my side, I'll let Bai Qingshui be a dog. System, this old joke is so old that I can't chew it. Wei Wei Bai, or make me even more miserable. With no way to ask for help, I want to work to make a living. He'll threaten others to fire me, forcing me to starve to death and can only go to his side. System, this crazy melodramatic plot can't be swallowed. Wei Wei Bai shook her head. A good plot of torturing deep love and intertwining hatred to imprison the CEO, but it's gone just like that. System, maybe it's because the male lead hasn't read CEO novels. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment. That's right, so it's understandable that he doesn't have a rich imagination. System, Shen Anming was fidgeting and drinking coffee when he finally saw the door open. He immediately looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai walk in. Her steps were graceful, her long hair hanging down to her waist. She was so beautiful that people couldn't look away. As Wei Wei Bai's #1 admirer, Shen Anming immediately stood up in excitement. Wei Wei, you're here. Wei Wei Bai sat down expressionlessly. Shen Anming immediately ordered a coffee. He knew how much milk and sugar Wei Wei Bai liked to put in. Wei Wei Bai said, "Where's the invitation?" Shen Anming immediately took out an invitation. This is an invitation to tonight's banquet. The banquet will be held after today's business meeting. Many powerful business tycoons will be there. Wei Wei Bai took the invitation and said faintly, "Thank you." Shen Anming was touched. "I will do my best to fight for what you want." Wei Wei Bai put away the invitation. "I plan to seduce a powerful man tonight, the kind that can destroy M Group. Give me a few names for me to consider." Shen Anming was originally happily drinking a mouthful of coffee, but when he heard her words, he almost choked himself to death. What? Seduce men? Wei Wei Bai looked up, her beautiful eyes gloomy. Do I have any other methods? The Bai family has become like this, and my father is in the hospital. I can't beat Su Mengue, but I have the capital of a woman. Or do you think there's a man I can't seduce? Shen Anming couldn't help saying, "Of course you can seduce any man." "No, I mean, Wei Wei, don't go. There are other methods." Wei Wei Bai looked at him sadly. "Shen Anming, there's no other way. I have to take back the Bai family before my father wakes up." Shen Anming said impulsively, "Why don't you marry me? I'll go fight Su Mengue." When the Bai family was swallowed up, everyone was dumbfounded. Only then did they know that M Group's president was Su Mengue. Wei Wei Bai heard his words and couldn't help but laugh. Shen Anming stared blankly. "Next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it. If you like, comma." Chapter 746. Wei Wei Bai had already stood up. She reached out to tuck a strand of long hair behind her ear. A woman's amorous feelings had just been displayed on her body. She lowered her head and gently planted a kiss on his cheek. "I don't want to implicate you." "Thank you." Shen Anming only felt a feather slide past his cheek. He stared blankly at Wei Wei Bai as she turned and left. His heart thundered. The goddess kissed him. He felt that it didn't matter if he died now. When Wei Wei Bai walked out of the coffee shop, she casually glanced at the table next to her. It was the person following her. She pretended not to know and walked out. System, why are you flirting with cannon fodder Shin? There was no strategy to capture a passerby in the mission. Wei Wei Bai, I was hit hard. I went from a little princess to an old demoness. Because of the psychological trauma, I started playing with men. I flirted with one when I saw one, and even sold my body to save my own company. Bai Wei Wei said this and sighed. I really am a beautiful girl with a rough life, Oh. System. Allow me to vomit. Thank you. Su Mengue was working expressionlessly. The atmosphere in the company was terrible. He felt like he was living in hell. Luo Langwei was also trembling with fear. Recently, Su Mingue's mood was like the Antarctic, so cold that people couldn't live. Su Mingue's phone suddenly rang with a message notification. He abruptly stopped writing and glanced at the number of the message. It was the person following Wei Wei Bai. Although he said he would let go, Su Mengue couldn't help but have someone follow her. Su Mengue clicked on the message. The first picture was of her wearing a pink spaghetti strap dress, looking back. Everyone was just her background. Unspeakably beautiful. The corners of Su Mingue's mouth rose slightly, but the second picture completely froze his smile. She was actually dating a man. Wasn't this the Shin Anming who wanted to expose him last time? The Shin family was also one of the forces that helped defeat the Bai family this time. That was why Su Mengue didn't target the Shin family and only gave them a warning. The next picture made him grip his phone tightly, wishing he could smash it immediately. In the picture, Wei Wei Bai bent down and kissed him gently. His already tense emotions were completely crushed by this photo. Didn't she like him? Even if she hated him now, she should still be thinking about him. It had only been a few days, but he already had a new target. Su Mengue called the person following them. What did they say? Was it a relationship or a mutual confession? All kinds of thoughts made Su Mengue gloomy and irritable. The person who was following by Wei Wei and Shin Anming spoke in full detail, without any modification, about the conversation between the two people. Just like a repeater. After Su Mengue hung up, he sneered, "Good, very good, Wei Wei Bai. Seducing Shin Anming to get an invitation. Then, she would enter the power banquet of the business circle and seduce men to destroy him. Who gave her the idea? He was willing to go all out. He had seen women who used their bodies in exchange for wealth and power. This is very common. This was nothing new. Therefore, he was not surprised that Wei Wei Bai would want to exchange her body for this. He didn't think. Su Mengue suddenly stood up, opened the office door, and said to Luo Langwei, who was about to go out, "I'm going to the banquet tonight." Almost all the company's senior leaders would attend this kind of banquet. Luo Langwei was in charge of all M Group's external affairs, so he attended these banquets. Adjusting his tie, Luo Langwei said in surprise, "Don't you not attend these kinds of social banquets?" Fast. Chapter 747. Su Mengue glanced at Luo Langwei. He was dressed like a dog, and even his tie was red. He knew that Luo Langwei had a habit of flirting with women at banquets. He thought of how Wei Wei Bai would go to that banquet tonight to seduce men. His gaze at Luo Langwei was exceptionally frightening. Perhaps Luo Langwei would also become one of her targets. Luo Langwei was also a sensitive person. Sensing his partner's murderous aura, he immediately said, "If you want to attend, then I won't. I still have other appointments." Su Mingue's face was cold, and his murderous aura was finally gone. He slammed the door. Then he paced back and forth. He glanced at the time, worried that Wei Wei Bai would arrive when the banquet started. He immediately walked out and rushed to the banquet's address. The banquet had just started when some bigwigs arrived one after another. When Su Mengue arrived, many people came over to say hello. The Bai family was defeated. This battle had made them famous. Su Mengue moved from behind the scenes to the front of the stage. Everyone knew that Su Mengue had appeared in that dilapidated place of the Su family. M Group was the target of many people's flattery. Su Mengue absent-mindedly entertained. From time to time, Someone would come over and congratulate him, saying that swallowing the Bai family was amazing, blah, blah, blah. When Su Mengue heard this kind of praise, he couldn't feel happy at all and was even incomparably irritable. Because of his impatient heart, the various methods that used to be easy to deal with became unbearable. He held a glass of wine and leaned in a secluded spot, staring at the door. After an hour, almost everyone had arrived. Su Mengue couldn't describe his mood, but Wei Wei Bai didn't come. Perhaps she had given up the idea of seducing another man. This made him feel relieved. She still couldn't let go of him. Su Mengue relaxed and took a sip of wine when he heard the people around him suck in a breath. He frowned and unconsciously looked at the door. He saw a lithe and graceful figure appear in the doorway. She wore a tight blue sleeveless dress. Beautiful light blue hollow flowers covered the entire dress. Her beautiful legs were exposed, clad in slender high heels. Her ankles were as exquisite as a work of art. Her round and perfect shoulders were also fully exposed. Her collarbones were perfectly shaped. She was charming but not seductive. She was dewy but still carried a pure and clean feeling. She was so beautiful that everyone present paled in comparison. It was Wei Wei Bai. Su Mengue was like everyone else present. He couldn't help but keep his eyes on her, unwilling to move them away. Suddenly, a faint smile appeared on her face. She stretched out her snow-white hand and said to the man beside her with sparkling eyes, "I don't have a partner, can you dance with me?" The man was pleasantly surprised. "Of course, it's my honor." Su Mengue almost crushed the cup in his hand. She was no longer the willful and cute little princess of the Bai family. She was simply a seductress. What man wouldn't be tempted by her? Wei Wei Bai's face was tender and beautiful. She led a man into the dancing area. Her eyes absent-mindedly swept over Su Mengue. She was stunned, as if she didn't know that he would be here. Su Mengue's heart tightened, and he stared at her without letting go. Wei Wei Bai suddenly gave him a disdainful smile without the slightest bit of affection. Then, she approached the strange man. She began to dance. Su Mengue downed the wine in his hand in one gulp. The feeling of the wine rolling down his throat was like a knife cutting through it. She actually didn't care about him at all. Slag Abuse Index, 40. Fast. Fast. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record your reading record. Fast. Chapter 748. After Wei Wei Bai finished dancing with the man, she smiled and said something to the man. Then she walked away. That walking posture, that back view, that silent glance back, it was simply flirtatious to the point of brazenly flirting, yet it made people feel as if it was syrup to be flirted with. Many men at the scene began to get restless. Their gazes were glued to her. Wei Wei Bai walked to the place where the wine was placed. She picked up a glass of red wine and faintly raised her eyes. She saw Su Mengue standing not far away, leaning against the curtain, holding an empty glass and coldly looking at her. Wei Wei Bai's smile didn't change. She raised the wine in her hand and made a provocative toast to him. Then she downed the glass in one gulp and turned to leave. Su Mengue looked at her back as if he was looking at an enemy who had killed his father. That intense emotion could eat people up. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have completely thrown him to the back of her mind. In the blink of an eye, she hooked up with another man. He was a tycoon in the electronics industry with outstanding strength. The man looked at her like a wolf seeing meat, his eyes bright with greed. "I remember that your family has been in decline recently." The man cautiously probed. Wei Wei Bai shook the wine glass, frowning and sighing. "My family is not only in decline, but has already declared bankruptcy. I had no choice but to come out and ask for some help. With that, she gently held the glass and took a sip of wine. This action made the tycoon's breathing unsteady. He hurriedly said, I can help. How much do you need? Wei Wei Bai smiled. This favor is too big. I have nothing now. There's no way to repay you. The man chuckled and couldn't help but pull her hand. Isn't there still you? This was a naked transaction. It happened from time to time. No one found this kind of transaction strange. Wei Wei Bai quietly frowned. Her fingers couldn't help but move back, not letting him grab them. But the man was insatiable. He leaned over. The little princess of the Bai family, now that you've fallen to this point, only I can take you in. Wei Wei Bai's expression darkened. The man thought that there was a chance. He immediately grabbed her hand. If you follow me, you won't have to worry about glory and wealth in the future. Even if the Bai family is gone, I can support you. Wei Wei Bai struggled for a moment before she said in resignation, then transfer 10 million yuan to my account as a deposit first. The man immediately said, I'll do it now, but I need your deposit. Wei Wei Bai thought for a moment, nodded, and gestured for him to come closer. The system also reminded her, countdown to the male lead's attack in 5. Wei Wei Bai gently kissed the man on the cheek. The system said, the male lead's attack, 4, 1, it's here. The kiss hadn't ended yet. A fist had already landed on the man's face. The man screamed. Su Mengue had already walked out from behind Wei Wei Bai. He calmly rolled up his sleeves and quickly walked out. He reached out and grabbed the man's collar, beating him to death. His usual gentle and elegant appearance was now like a demon. His eyes were so cold that it made people shudder. The people around them didn't dare to step forward to stop him, for fear that Su Mengue would remember them. The man was beaten half to death and thrown to the ground. Su Mengue calmly put his sleeves back and turned to look at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was being targeted by a hungry wolf. Her back was cold, but she had no choice but to maintain her posture. She bit her lip and said, Su Mengue, are you crazy? Su Mengue stared at her with a malicious expression for a long time before he suddenly laughed coldly. Can 10 million buy you? / com / Chapter 749. Wei Wei Bai retreated a few steps, suddenly a little scared. Su Mengue stepped forward like a beast on the hunt, his momentum terrifying as he approached Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai's face was a little pale, but she still refused to show weakness. She revealed a disdainful sneer. As long as I can bring you down, not to mention 10 million, even if it's $1, I'll sell. These words completely broke all reason in Su Mengue's mind. He suddenly reached out, grabbed her, and pulled her out. Wei Wei Bai staggered as she was pulled away. During this time, no one dared to come up and fight with Su Mengue. This matter didn't concern them. More importantly, they didn't dare to offend M Group, which was at its peak. Wei Wei Bai struggled desperately, trying to shake off his hand. But his fingers were incomparably strong. No matter how hard Wei Wei Bai tried, she couldn't budge him in the slightest. Su Mengue stuffed Wei Wei Bai into the car. Then he got into the driver's seat and saw that Wei Wei Bai was going to open the door. Su Mengue expressionlessly locked the door, and the car quickly drove away. Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't bear it anymore. She turned back and angrily said to him, Su Mengue, what do you mean? Are you trying to kill me to the last one? Su Mengue didn't say a word. His fingers gripped the steering wheel, the veins on the back of his hand popping out. He suppressed his immense anger and finally drove the car into a bustling area of the city. His apartment was here, on the top floor of a tall building. Su Mengue drove into the garage, got out of the car, and was about to pull Wei Bai out. Wei Bai's high heels stomped on the car, refusing to go out. She even slapped Su Mengue's hand. "What do you want to do, you bastard? Do you know that it wasn't easy for me to get an invitation?" It was fine if he didn't mention the invitation. As soon as he mentioned the invitation, Su Mengue thought of the photo of her bending over for a kiss. The fire began to burn in an instant. His dark eyes seemed to be able to see the light of anger. "You're really willing to sell anything to hook up with a rich man." If I hadn't stopped her, she would have slept with a man who could afford 10 million. Wei Bai's face paled, and there was sadness in her eyes. Su Mengue was stung by her expression. He thought about how she had never suffered before, yet she had met him. He had messed up her life and made it fall apart. How could she be willing to sell herself? Pity came quickly and fiercely. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 65. Wei Bai suddenly shook off his hand and smiled coldly. "Yes, my body is valuable. If I don't sell myself while I'm still young, how can I buy the Bai family back?" She spoke resolutely and earnestly. He didn't look regretful at all. Su Mengue's breathing quickened as he stared at her. He suddenly stretched out his hands and dragged her out of the car. Wei Bai immediately shouted, "Su Mengue, you lunatic, rogue, I'm going to call the police." Su Mengue picked her up by the waist and imprisoned her hands. Ignoring her struggles, he walked to the elevator. In the elevator, Wei Bai scratched his face a few times. Su Mengue finally pressed her against the elevator wall and kissed her fiercely. This kiss was like he wanted to eat her up, not giving her any chance to resist. They arrived at the top floor. The entire floor belonged to Su Mengue. Su Mengue pushed Wei Bai into his apartment and locked the door. Wei Bai was shocked to realize that she had been locked up. She looked at Su Mengue, who was completely different from before, and finally couldn't suppress the fear in her throat. "What are you doing? Isn't it enough that you took everything from me? You still want to silence me?" / Calm. Chapter 750. You can search Transmigration System, Prince Charming, you come to Sashu. Calm in Baidu to find the. Su Mengue leaned against the door, looking at her with red eyes. There was a struggling expression on his face, as though he was suppressing something. Wei Bai couldn't help but take a few steps back. But the heel of her high-heeled shoes suddenly broke, and she sat down on the carpet. The beautiful, tight little skirt also tore open, opening up to her thigh, revealing a patch of snow-white skin. Su Mengue straightened up, the struggle in his eyes covered by an even more frightening darkness. Wei Bai quickly reached out to grab the large opening, an ugly expression on her face. She glared fiercely at Su Mengue. "You're not allowed to look." Her beautiful black eyes carried traces of timid fear, but they still carried a clarity that made people want to destroy them. The struggle in Su Mengue's heart disappeared. He let out a sigh and finally admitted that he couldn't let go of her. The pain of these days like a trapped beast turned out to be just to resist his longing for her. Su Mengue unbuttoned his cuffs and took off his clothes, placing them one by one on the hanger by the door. Wei Bai looked at him in bewilderment. Until his upper body was bare, he began to take off his pants. Wei Bai reacted. "What are you doing?" Su Mengue took off his pants, revealing his strong and beautiful long legs. He looked up, the fire in his eyes burning even brighter. He slowly said, "Fuck you." Wei Bai, this answer was too explosive, making the atmosphere silent for a moment. Su Mengue was only left with a pair of underwear. His shoulders were wide, his hips were narrow, his legs were long, and his waist was strong. The thin layer of muscles on his body was just right, but it looked very explosive. He had the face of a cultured person. After taking off his clothes, he was more frightening than a beast. For the first time, Wei Wei Bai saw the phrase, "a beast in human clothing," perfectly presented in reality. She didn't have time to escape before she was caught under Su Mingui's body. His breathing was rapid, but his expression was still calm. "If you want to sell yourself, why not sell yourself to me? Not to mention 10 million, even if it's 10 or 100 times that, I can afford it." His fingers gently caressed the delicate skin of her face, his actions dangerous and ambiguous. Wei Wei Bai raised her hand and gave him a slap. Her palm was numb from the slap. Su Mengue didn't dodge and just let her hit him. His cheeks turned red, but the look in his eyes was extremely dangerous. "You can continue to hit me until you're no longer angry. I don't mind." Wei Wei Bai, fuck, the target of this strategy is insane, so scary. The system said, don't worry about whether it's scared or not. Take the chance to hit it a few more times and see if the scum abuse index will increase. Don't just increase the favorability points. Wei Wei Bai thought about it and felt that it made sense. Her expression immediately changed. "Su Mengue, keep dreaming. I'll sell to anyone but you." After saying that, she did not hesitate and slapped his face again. Su Mengue remained unmoved. Even when he trapped her under his body, he didn't budge an inch. Wei Wei Bai bit her lip and her fingers began to tremble. "Let go of me." Su Mengue's voice was hoarse. "Not letting go." Wei Wei Bai slapped him again with such force. Su Mengue was like nothing had happened. His cheeks were red from the slap, but he didn't move an inch. He still turned his face to the side. "Hit me a few more times." Wei Wei Bai and the system hugged each other and trembled. This strategy target was indeed a little scary. Su Mengue saw the fear on her face and stuck out the tip of his tongue to lick the corner of his lips. He laughed softly and said, "You've calmed down. Then it's my turn." His hand began to climb up along her knee, rubbing it. Chapter 751. Wei Wei Bai's eyes dangerously paused between Su Mingui's legs. She finally suppressed her frightening thoughts. If she really stepped on them, the favorability would drop to the bottom at any moment. Don't think of rising back up. Bai Wei Wei hurriedly stood up and hurriedly pulled up her zipper. There was a tear in her skirt, but she didn't seem to care. She rushed to the door, wanting to open it and go out. The door was already locked. It was a passcode fingerprint lock. Wei Wei Bai reached out and slammed the door. A shadow suddenly covered her. A hand appeared by her ear, supporting the door. Su Mingue's entire body pressed against her. His breathing was chaotic, and he couldn't even stand steadily. "Do you hate me that much?" His voice was hoarse, sounding particularly dangerous. Wei Wei Bai froze. She lowered her head, and her fingers couldn't help but clench into fists. She looked like she was struggling. Finally, she lifted her head. Her eyes were red, and her voice was choked with sobs. "Yes, Su Mengue. You make me hate you." Su Mengue was silent for a moment before he suddenly sneered. "Then why did you pretend to love me so much in the beginning? Was it just to play around? Wait until you got tired of me and then dump me." Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth. "You heartless thing. The person I like will be shy when I kiss him. When I'm in danger, he'll come to save me regardless of his own safety. If I'm happy, he'll be happier." Every sentence seemed to be pulled out from a wound. Bloody pain. Su Mengue could even feel the tremor in her voice from enduring too much pain. She laughed at herself. You're not the Su Mengue I like. You're not. Saying this, she reached out again, wanting to open the door. The doorknob was still cold and indifferent. Su Mengue's hand suddenly fell and grabbed her hand that was holding the doorknob. Wei Wei Bai's fingers trembled. She wanted to struggle. But Su Mengue didn't let her struggle. Their 10 fingers intertwined. Wei Wei Bai finally became angry. Su Mengue, is there any meaning to this? What kind of fucking grudge do I have with you? You destroyed my family. I'll just treat it as a hostile takeover by a competitor. But what do you want to do now? Or do you think that I'm still useful to you, so you insist on biting me and not letting me go? Her angry words were filled with grief and grievance. Su Mengue was struck in the heart by her words. His fingers loosened, but he was still hesitant. His voice softened. Wei Wei, I'm not a good person. Bai Wei Wei didn't say anything. Su Mengue, the Su Mengue you like is all an act, and I can't pretend for a lifetime. When he said this, he laughed. His laughter sent chills down people's backs. So I won't pretend anymore. I like you. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 70. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows as a trace of contemplation flashed through her eyes. Was Su Mengue going to make an affectionate confession? Just as she thought this, Su Mengue's hand suddenly opened the door. The door opened. They stood in the doorway. Su Mengue also retreated. He even took the coat hanging on the hanger by the door and wrapped it around her waist. He made the tear in her skirt invisible. Wei Wei Bai didn't turn her head. Her body stiffened as she looked outside the door. Su Mengue said, "You can leave, if you don't like me." Wei Wei Bai revealed a trace of mockery. Just as she was about to take a step forward and walk out, Su Mengue's voice, as gentle as the ravings of a wild beast, faintly sounded. I'm not a good person. Wei Wei Bai, I know you're not a good person. You don't have to keep emphasizing it. Su Mengue, so as long as you dare to walk out of this door, I won't let you have an easy time. Bai Wei Wei. At the slash to read at https://www.sashu.com at https://www.sashu.com to read on. Calm. Chapter 752. Su Mengue's black eyes were bottomless. His expression was gentle, but it was still frightening. He said softly, "You don't like me. I will force you to like me." Wei Wei Bai, Su Mengue didn't care about her attitude and continued in a soft voice, "I will make you homeless, freeze your accounts, have no way to ask for help, have no food to eat or clothes to keep warm, and can't stay anywhere." Wei Wei Bai was deeply silent. This wasn't just not a good person. This wasn't human. Was this liking you? This was having a deep hatred for you. Wei Wei Bai knocked on the system. Tongzi, can't you test when you choose a target? What kind of freakish characters were these? System, randomly placed. No refunds. Su Mengue looked at her back as she stood at the door without looking back. He gently threatened, "So what are you going to choose? Stay, or leave?" Wei Wei Bai stood in silence. Su Mengue didn't speak again, but the pain in his heart accumulated more and more. He even nervously clenched his fists. He held his breath, waiting for her answer. Wei Wei Bai suddenly laughed, and her voice suddenly turned cold. "Su Mengue, you're simply crazy. In any case, you've already destroyed my family. It's only right that you deal with me." Her answer was like a knife stabbing into his heart. Su Mengue couldn't muster up his momentum. Instead, it was Wei Wei Bai who finally turned her head. Her eyes were filled with resentment, but there wasn't the slightest hint of sadness from being defeated. Instead, it was a stubborn coldness. If you have the guts, then kill me. I won't stay by your side. With that, she didn't hesitate to walk out. Scum Abuse Index, 65. Su Mengue looked at the empty door. After a long time, he finally determined that Wei Wei Bai hadn't come back. He finally lost all his strength and sat on the ground. Only then did he dare to reveal the blankness and sluggishness on his face. It's already like this. You still won't stay. Su Mengue believed that he had already cut off all her escape routes. He picked up his cell phone and called Luo Langyue. Call a doctor for me. Luo Langyue asked, Are you hurt? Su Mengue, it's down there. Wei Wei Bai's blow was very heavy. Su Mengue was holding on to not fall in front of Wei Wei Bai. Also, Su Mengue paused and finally said, I want Wei Wei to return to my side. Luo Langyue hesitated for a second before saying, Aren't you enemies with her? Su Mengue turned a deaf ear. Have someone follow her. Freeze her bank account and take back the house. As for Bai Qingshui, he hesitated for a moment before saying, Let's leave Bai Qingshui first. Let her have nowhere to go first. Let's talk about it when she can't fill her stomach. Luo Langyue was at a loss for a moment. Wait, don't you like her? What kind of liking was this? So ruthless. Su Mengue didn't answer but hung up. He was still looking at the door, not knowing how much time had passed. He suddenly laughed out loud, mocking himself. He felt that he was ridiculous. When he was young, he was abused. He couldn't eat or sleep well. He felt that it was the most terrible thing in the world. At that time, he thought that even if it was an enemy, if they could give him a blanket or a bowl of rice, he would follow them. But now, he was using it against the girl he liked. Because he knew that he would lose everything. The feeling of not being able to fill his stomach was terrifying. So terrifying that even if she loathed him, she would return to his side. Chapter 753. Wei Wei Bai went down the stairs. Her first reaction was to swipe her card. Su Mengue, that psychopath, said he wanted her to be cornered, so he would definitely make her cornered. But as soon as the card was swiped, it froze. The speed was frightening. Wei Wei Bai could only return to the Bai family and change her clothes. Just as she finished changing, she was politely driven out of the house. Because the house was confiscated. There was no justice. The house was given and taken away just like that. If she had known earlier, she would have opened the fridge and dug out a few more pieces of bread before leaving. Wei Wei Bai stood on the street and said to the system, Su Mengue is still too naive. Does he really think he's an overbearing CEO who can rule the world? She flipped her hair. In today's society, I won't starve to death even if I sweep the streets. What's there to be afraid of? As soon as she finished speaking, her stomach rumbled. Wei Wei Bai decided to use her innate advantage to freeload a meal first. When she brushed shoulders with a certain passerby, she glanced back and smiled. The man immediately blushed. Wei Wei Bai said generously, Can you treat me to a meal? The man immediately nodded like he was pounding garlic. Yes, of course. But as soon as he finished speaking, several burly men in black suits walked out, one covering his mouth and the other grabbing his legs. Just like that, the passerby was carried away. Wei Wei Bai, the system comforted her. Maybe you can try KFC. Wei Wei Bai, am I going to be reduced to working as a cleaner? System, you have to eat before you can work. Wei Wei Bai glanced at the fast food restaurant's recruitment notice. She felt that with her image, she could easily get a job. After all, as long as she ate for 2 days, she could apply for a good job again. The original owner's educational background was quite high. Wei Wei Bai entered the fast food restaurant. As soon as she explained her intentions and the boss was about to agree, a phone call made the boss's expression change. Then, Wei Wei Bai was chased away. In the following days, no matter where Wei Wei Bai went, all the places rejected her. She picked up a coin and wanted to buy a vegetable bun, but the coin was snatched away. In this day and age, even a single dollar would be snatched away. In the end, Wei Wei Bai had no choice but to call Shen Anming. However, Shen Anming's phone was turned off. Wei Wei Bai discovered that Su Mengue could really starve her to death. It's late at night. Wei Wei Bai wants to go to the mall to get some light. The 24-hour shopping mall was closed early because of a malfunction. Wei Wei Bai had no choice but to walk alone to the corridor by the river. There were stools and pavilions here. There were also street lamps. Fortunately, the weather was not hot and there were no mosquitoes. Wei Wei Bai lay on a bench and looked at the stars in the sky. What do you think Su Mengue means? If he liked someone, he would starve her and force her to be homeless. This wasn't something a normal person would do. System, the male lead's thoughts are hard to guess. Wei Wei Bai nodded in agreement. So can you conjure up food? System, the topic changed too quickly, like a tornado. It thought for a moment. Buy a system instant noodle for you to eat. Wei Wei Bai, are there any side effects? System, humans who eat it will mostly get epilepsy, rabies, and other minor illnesses. Wei Wei Bai, what kind of minor illness is this? It can scare people to death. She refused the food produced by the system. The phone suddenly rang. Wei Wei Bai picked up. There was a long silence on the other side. Do you want to come back? Wei Wei Bai coldly said, to facilitate your next reading, you can click on at the bottom to record this reading, comma. Chapter 754. With that, she hung up the phone. She was so hungry that she couldn't wait to pull Su Mengue out and beat him up. She had no time to pay attention to this psychopath. Scum Abuse Index, 68. 1 word in exchange for 3 points of index. If she had known earlier, she would have yelled, scram, a few more times. Wei Wei Bai sighed. How did I get to the point of sleeping on the streets? System, pick up a few more newspapers. Otherwise, the weather will be cold and you'll feel uncomfortable sleeping. Wei Wei Bai almost cried when she heard this. Even the homeless had a few tattered blankets. She was the only one who had to pick up the newspapers. Wei Wei Bai stood up and accepted her fate to pick up the newspapers. People had to be flexible. After all, the weather really was a bit cold. When she picked up the newspapers, she actually picked up 20 yuan. Wei Wei Bai held the 20 yuan bill. Everything, look, 20 yuan. System, host, you screwed up. How did you get to this point? It couldn't bear to hurt her and could only comfort her. That's a lot, Wei Wei Bai was afraid of being robbed, so she ran to buy a loaf of bread and a cup of cola. Just as she was about to eat, the sound of crying came from beside her feet. Wei Wei Bai stiffened and looked down. A homeless little boy was crying pitifully as he looked at her. Sister, can you give me something to eat? Wei Wei Bai asked the system. Was this also sent by psychopath Su? System, N. Wei Wei Bai, she had to ponder what Su Mengue was thinking. Otherwise, it would be difficult for the favorability to increase in the future. Wei Wei Bai's mind spun several times before she looked at Su Mingue's information from childhood to adulthood. She roughly understood some of Su Mingue's thoughts. She glanced at the little boy and silently broke off half a piece of bread, handing it to him. Eat, half each. I'm also hungry. Wei Wei Bai spoke the truth, which made her seem sincere. The little boy took the bread and ran off. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Not even a word of thanks. The system opened its heaven's eye. The little boy took the bread and ran to the corner. There was a big man in a black suit. The little boy took the bread and handed it to him. He gave him a few notes. Deeper in the corner, Su Mingue's face was somewhat pale. He wore a brown windbreaker, and his hair was somewhat disheveled as he leaned against the wall. He looked at the half loaf of bread with a complicated expression. You're already so hungry, yet you're still giving it to others. Seriously, haven't you been too hungry? The system retracted its gaze and saw that Wei Wei Bai had solved the problem of food and drink. Then, she hugged a few newspapers and ran to the pavilion. She laid them down and prepared to rest. Wei Wei Bai said, Tongzi, good night. Sweet dreams. Wei Wei Bai thought that she wouldn't be able to sleep, but because she was too tired, she closed her eyes and fell asleep. The system was watching over her. If there was a hooligan or something like that, it could even alert the host. In the end, the local ruffian didn't come, but Su Mingue did. He stood outside the pavilion, smoking a cigarette, his face gloomy and haggard. He seemed even more pitiful than the host. He slowly walked in and crouched down beside her, staring blankly at her. Wei Wei Bai was curled up, a few newspapers covering her body. It didn't have any effect on keeping out the cold. She was also shivering from the cold, her brows tightly furrowed. Her skin was still beautiful and delicate, but he could still see her sorry state. He stubbed out his cigarette and sat to the side, watching over her like this. He whispered to himself, why don't you accept your fate? No place to go, no food. Isn't that the most painful thing? Like him, she had fallen to a dark place. To get rid of the painful memories of her childhood, she had degenerated and become a demon. This was the most correct choice for a person. If she was forced into a dead end, she would also become a demon. She wouldn't have kindness in her heart, just like him. Su Mingue smiled with a pale face. You're actually willing to share your bread with others. Sure enough, I'm still too kind to you. He saw that in her desperate situation, she was willing to share the food in her hands with the people he sent. At that moment, anger and adoration appeared at the same time. Anger that she didn't accept her fate and didn't degenerate. But he couldn't help but be moved by her actions. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 75. Transmigration system, male god, come here. 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 Chapter 755. Wei Wei Bai thought that Su Mingue would only starve her for 2 days at most. But she found that she was wrong. This psychopath could harden his heart. She had been wandering outside for a week, but he was still so deranged that he wouldn't even give her a part-time job sweeping the streets. In any case, she could hold on until she was about to starve to death. She could pick up 20 pieces. It only took a few days for her to turn numb from the happiness of picking up 20 pieces to numbness. In the end, when she saw 20 pieces, she couldn't wait to tear them apart. Of course, she still didn't tear them apart. After all, people had to be able. Able. If she didn't find an opportunity to turn Su Mengue 360 degrees around, she would live stream herself eating the system alive. System. When Shen Anming found Wei Wei Bai, he saw her sitting pitifully on the bench where the tourists rested, a few newspapers under her, a hamburger in her hand. Her long hair was a bit messy, draped behind her. Although her clothes weren't messy, it was obvious that she hadn't changed in a few days. Her entire person was haggard and tired, but because her eyes were soulless, there was a hint of softness. Her dark eyes were misty, making anyone feel pity for her. He rushed over with heartache and crouched by her side, simply unable to speak. Who was Wei Wei Bai? She was a golden branch and jade leaf from a young age, a young miss who was coaxed as she grew up. When had she ever suffered this kind of hardship? Su Mengue, that bastard, how could he force her like this? Shen Anming saw her like this, and his eyes reddened. She was his goddess. Wei Wei Bai looked down and greeted, "What's wrong? Is your family bankrupt?" She hadn't felt wronged yet. Shen Anming looked like he was going to cry first. Shen Anming immediately said, "Wei Wei, I'll take you away. I was locked up by my father. Only yesterday did I find out that bastard Su Mengue had already warned everyone. As long as you're in this city, no one will help you." Wei Wei Bai looked at him, a trace of struggle flashing through her eyes. "But my father." "Shen Anming, your father is fine. Su Mengue didn't do anything to him. I will have my father pay more attention and watch the hospital. I won't let anything happen to your father." Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief, then said with a bitter smile, "It's rare that you're willing to help me when I'm in trouble. True friends are born from adversity." The corner of Shen Anming's mouth twitched when he was given a friend card. In the end, he couldn't help but reach out and place his hand on the back of hers. Wei Wei Bai didn't respond. She just bit into her burger, calculating how to torture Su Mengue in her heart. Perhaps it was time for something more exciting. Otherwise, if this continued, she would really become a homeless person who slept on the streets with a newspaper over her head. She was so miserable that even she couldn't bear to look at it. Wei Wei Bai looked at Shen Anming and smiled. She suddenly said, "Then let's run away." With that, she stood up and held his hand. A light of excitement finally appeared in her lifeless eyes. Shen Anming nodded blankly. Then, as though he was startled awake, he immediately stood up and said somewhat helplessly, "Okay, I'll go buy plane tickets right away. We'll go abroad. Anywhere is fine. Su Mengue's power can't spread all over the world." Wei Wei Bai nodded. Under the sunlight, she smiled. After so many days, this was the first time she smiled so happily. Scum Abuse Index, 70. Wei Wei Bai didn't look around. She knew that Psycho Su must be nearby, keeping watch. She smiled even more happily. "Disgusting to death, you damn pervert." Shen Anming pulled Wei Wei Bai forward, so nervous that his muscles were trembling. Address of the full text, https://www.sashu.com. Download address of the full text, https://www.sashu.com. Read on. com//. Chapter 756. The goddess's hand was so soft. His hand was sweaty. Would it dirty her hand? All kinds of little thoughts appeared, turning Shen Anming into a robot with the same hands and feet. Shen Anming saw Wei Wei Bai's beautiful profile, and his nervous mood finally eased. Shen Anming called his father's secretary, intending to use his privilege to buy 2 plane tickets. But the phone was snatched away by his father. "Stinking brat, get your ass back here." You've offended Su Mengue. I can't save you. Shen Anming's expression froze. He looked at Wei Wei Bai and hung up without saying a word. He knew that it would be difficult to take away Wei Wei. But he still had to try. Shen Anming suddenly grasped her hand. Let's get rid of those followers first. With that, Shen Anming pulled her and ran into the mall. The people following Wei Wei Bai all rushed over. Su Mingui's beard was unshaven, his bangs covered his forehead, and his eyes were frighteningly dark. He held a cigarette and slowly followed. When he reached the place where they had just been standing, he remembered the smile she had just shown. Su Mengue greedily recalled. Ever since he ruined everything for her, she hadn't smiled at him like that. Clearly, before, a small character like Shen Anming. He didn't enter her eyes. But now, she was so happy to see him. Su Mengue knew that when a person reached a point of despair, as long as someone could give her a bit of warmth, she would like that person. Su Mengue originally thought that he could appear as that person. But Shen Anming wasn't afraid of death and came to steal his fruit. His eyes darkened. Courting death. To get rid of those bodyguards, Shen Anming took Wei Wei Bai and ran back and forth in the crowd. To exhaust the opponent's patience. They stayed in the mall for more than 2 hours. During this time, Shen Anming took Wei Wei Bai to buy some things. New clothes and some women's underwear. It was a very considerate and warm gesture. Shen Anming picked up a Pikachu for Wei Wei Bai in front of the claw machine. Wei Wei Bai squatted in front of the claw machine with him. Both of their faces were equally young and youthful. They looked exceptionally cute together. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be seeing Shen Anming clearly for the first time. She tilted her face and stared at him. Shen Anming blushed. What's wrong? Bai Weiwei smiled and said, look at how handsome you are. Shen Anming was incoherent from the compliment. No, I'm not as pretty as you. Really, you're very pretty. Wei Wei Bai's expression softened. She gently reached out and took Shen Anming's hand. If you still don't have a girlfriend by the time I get through this, Shen Anming's eyes lit up with surprise. No, I won't have a girlfriend in this lifetime. The position will always be yours, Wei Wei. No one can take it away from me. Wei Wei Bai smiled until her eyes narrowed. I was too willful before and couldn't see clearly who was good to me. It's really good to have you. Shen Anming couldn't help but laugh. You don't know, but I've been secretly in love with you for a long time. Wei Wei Bai, you have good taste. Shen Anming, I think so too. System. Where's the male lead? Why do I feel like the male lead is going to be replaced? On the other end of the claw machine, Su Mengue leaned against the railing on the second floor of the shopping mall. He coldly looked at the two people opposite him. His expression was as calm as ever. His heart felt like it was being stirred by something. It was so uncomfortable that smoking couldn't ease it. There were already many cigarette butts thrown at his feet. The murderous intent in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. Read the full text. Download the full text. Read the full text. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.